Chapter 2190. Summit. The Rain Emperor's experiences were naturally very rough. After he'd begun his lone journey, he had done odd jobs in powerful clans before, had been a disciple in inferior minor sects, had also been quick to repay debts of gratitude and vengeance, had been forced deep into the mountains, and had become a loner. However, he was extremely resilient. He had always been able to walk out of multiple dilemmas, and became stronger and stronger. The Rain Emperor's luck was not too bad, either. When he attained the fourth severance, he entered into an ancient site, and obtained a natural peach seal, allowing him to achieve the fifth severance, and after advancing into dividing soul tier, he obtained the remains of a ninth heaven celestial king, which he then refined into his own body. What kind of benefits did that have? He achieved dividing 9 souls. To accomplish this, it was not absolutely necessary that one had to have 9 source powers of heaven and earth. For example, Ji Wuming had also formed 9 divided souls with a celestial king imprint from his last life, but Ling Han had not become a celestial king in his last life, nor had he obtained any celestial king remains, so he could only rely on the source powers of heaven and earth. In comparison, using the source powers of heaven and earth to form 9 divided souls was definitely superior. Even a ninth heaven celestial king could only stand equal to the heaven and earth instead of truly being capable of replacing the heaven and earth. Later, the Rain Emperor joined the Great Majestic Sect, and very soon climbed from the position of an external disciple all the way to become a holy son. With his domineering air and strength, he definitely left his competitors far behind, causing all the other holy sons to pale in color next to his brilliance. Thus, he met with the combined targeting of a great many holy sons, which ultimately took the form of killing intent at Dragon's Gate Mountain as they launched an attack on him. However, the Dragon's Gate Mountain was very unique. Everyone's cultivation level would be suppressed to the mountain river tier, and the Rain Emperor had created his own techniques, forming his own path. In a situation of his cultivation level being suppressed, he would instead become stronger. Added with Ling Han's help, they had sent the 6 holy sons into panicked flight. Ling Han couldn't help but muse inwardly that the second brother's luck was actually overwhelmingly strong. He clearly did not have any heaven-defying treasure, nor was he a reincarnated ninth heaven celestial king, yet he still managed to attain dividing 9 souls. As long as he could break through the barrier of heaven's soul, the Rain Emperor would be able to form 9 divided souls as easily as splitting bamboo, looking down on all immortal palace tiers. This was a height that even the Empress and Hu Niu could not reach. Ling Han was sure that there were indeed doted sons of heaven and earth in this world. Of course, the Rain Emperor himself was an extraordinary prodigy of cultivation, and this was an undeniable fact. The Dragon's Gate Mountain really had a variety of different tests of willpower. Thankfully, all of them either were monarch tiers, or had something that supported their determination. Their willpower was like a sharp blade that became stronger and sturdier through being tempered. 7 years later, they could finally see the summit. Everyone looked overjoyed, and hurriedly increased their pace. They could see that there was a stone doorway at the summit, and it looked quite ordinary, but hundreds of beasts were engraved on the doorframe, and they all looked vivid and lifelike. These are all source beasts, someone said slowly, the creatures that were born at the beginning of the heaven and earth. They carry a natural intimidating air, and even if they are merely engravings, it can still be felt. Furthermore, aside from heaven and earth, there is not one person that can carve out the image of a source beast. Ling Han had heard that theory before, and nodded internally. That was why it was said that the Dragon's Gate Mountain was nurtured by the heaven and earth. This was clear evidence. Now, it was only the last step that was left, leaping over the Dragon's Gate. Ling Han's gaze swept by. He actually spotted a few familiar faces. Brother Ling. Someone walked over, clasping his hands in greeting towards Ling Han. Yulan Fenghua. His expression was filled with confidence. Not too long ago, he had successfully broken through to the Immortal Palace tier, and was presently a first secret elite. After he had leaped over the Dragon's Gate, he would be further improved in all aspects. In the future, it might be that he could even become an equal of the Imperial Void Celestial King. Who was the Imperial Void Celestial King? A ninth heaven Celestial King. In fact, he could possibly become a heavenly Venerate in a few more epochs. Ling Han nodded and replied, "So it is Brother Yulan." Yulan Fenghua couldn't help but ask, "After we leave, why don't we have a spar?" In the past, when they had entered the Lost Land from the ancient realm, both he and Ling Han were clearly dividing soul tiers, yet he was clearly no match for the latter. This was something he could not accept, and now that he had broken through to the immortal palace tier, he thus issued a challenge to Ling Han. He was not planning to use his superior strength to bully the weak, and merely wanted Ling Han to admit that he was outmatched, satisfying his pride. Sure, Ling Han replied casually. This person had repeatedly nurtured sinister designs against him, and he could not help but want to kill him too. As for the Imperial Void Sect, with how prodigious he was, as long as he had changed his identity and showed off a bit of himself, he was confident that they would not close their doors on him. Ling Han! A soft exclamation rang out, and Enran too arrived elegantly, glaring angrily at Ling Han. You owe my master a great debt of gratitude, yet you actually turned your back on us. Are you even still human? Ling Han sighed softly. Towards Shangji Wei, he indeed felt grateful, apologetic, and a little hateful. His feelings towards her were very conflicted. He shook his head and said, regarding Aunt Wei, there will come a day when I will make my explanations to her. Ungrateful vile character, die! Enran ignored him, and moved directly. Boom! The Rain Emperor moved, blocking Enran's blow. You want to touch my fourth brother? You have to get through me first. Enran was surprised. Though her cultivation level had been suppressed, she was still a super monarch tier. Even an ordinary monarch tier would stumble back and retreat from this blow, but the Rain Emperor had parried hers easily. In fact, her arm was even numb from the force. Just how domineering was this? She was not to be trifled with, either. Immediately, she charged towards the Rain Emperor with a soft exclamation. Pang pang pang. The two of them battled fiercely. The Rain Emperor was pulling no punches in his attacks, sending Enran back in continuous retreat. There naturally were people who knew Enran here, and they couldn't help but watch in shock. Who was this incredibly domineering man? He was really too awesome. Meanwhile, Enran was completely filled with disbelief. In a battle of equals, she would actually be the one being suppressed. It should be known that even Shangji Wei had said that she herself was also not much stronger than this at this stage. Then didn't this mean that the Rain Emperor was even stronger than Shangji Wei in her youth? She did not believe it. Enran's battle cry did not die out. She was determined to defeat the Rain Emperor. Ling Han looked at the Rain Emperor, and looked at Enran. A strange thought suddenly popped up in his mind. Could these two become a couple? Leap over the Dragon's Gate. He gathered his idle thoughts. With how domineering the Rain Emperor was, he naturally had his own mind. There was no need for him to be overly concerned. The women were all eager to give it a try. Now that they had reached this place, it could be said that they had completed 90% of the journey, but as the saying went, the closer one was to completing a task, the tougher it got. If this last leap was not accomplished, then the carp would still be a carp, and could not become a dragon. And the last leap was not simple, either. It was not everyone that could succeed. Their belief had to be determined. Some leaped over and turned into dragons, flying down the mountain, while some fell off the mountain, howling in pain. They naturally were smashed into bits, with no hope of reprieve. The women all had determined, resolute expressions. At this moment, their willpower was as strong as divine metal, love supporting them. They definitely could not fail. They began to leap over the Dragon's Gate one after another. Ling Han's hands were clenched tightly into fists. He was concerned about all of them. First, it was Zhu Shen'er. With a leap, she crossed over the Dragon's Gate, and her body was immediately extended, turning into the body of a dragon, but her limbs did not change much. They merely took the form of dragon-clawed paws. Her four paws grasped at the clouds, and after circling once in the air, she left towards the foot of the mountain. Then, it was Li Sikan, Lu Yutong, Helian Shu and Xue. Each woman passed the test successfully, and when the last woman, Xue Yanyu, also crossed over the Dragon's Gate successfully, Ling Han finally breathed a sigh of relief. Cheng Zixin, Yan Xianlu, and the others also leaped over the Dragon's Gate one after another, turning into dragons that descended the mountain. Brother Ling, I'll take my leave first, Yulan Fenghua said smilingly, striding towards the Dragon's Gate. His white robes fluttered gracefully, with him looking incredibly poised and confident. With a light leap, he immediately turned into a green dragon that danced through the air. Second brother, stop fighting, Ling Han said to the Rain Emperor. All right. The Rain Emperor was very decisive, and turned around suddenly. Tossing and ran off his tail, he leaped over the dragon's gate and left. Don't even think of leaving. And Ran was not willing to give up, and set off in hot pursuit. Chapter 2191. Dragon Transformation Technique. Ling Han actually hoped that this second brother of his would gain a lover. Though the Rain Emperor had previously had a harem, when he had entered into the ancient realm, he had left behind all romantic affairs, his full being focused on cultivation. In Ling Han's eyes, this was too boring. Right. At present, they could continuously climb to the apex of cultivation. But what if the day came when there was nowhere further for them to ascend? What pleasures would there be left of life? It would be a different story if he had the company of a lover. However, the Rain Emperor was too domineering and too assertive. Would he be willing to listen to the advice of others? Ling Han sighed internally. With a bound, he leaped over the dragon's gate. Instantly, he felt a supreme force wrap around him, causing a tremendous change to take place in his form. Dragon Transformation. In truth, Celestials could change their form however they liked, and it was not the slightest bit difficult for them to take the form of a dragon. However, at present, it was not something as simple as just having the form of a dragon. There were masses of dragon chi surging towards his body. The dragon chi continuously nurtured his body, pushing it towards greater strength, and even turned into multiple seals, transmitting the intent of heaven and earth. Dragon Transformation Technique. For some reason, these three words flashed through Ling Han's mind. There is a cultivation technique contained in this dragon chi, and it is named Dragon Transformation Technique. After successfully learning it, one would gain the ability to transform into a dragon. Of course, this dragon transformation is only a general meaning, and does not really mean that one would truly become a dragon. Instead, he would possess the strength of a dragon. By then, if everyone were like dragons, then when the force of darkness invades, we would also be able to expel them. Hiss, this time, the heaven and earth has really spared no effort, actually passing on such a cultivation technique. Ling Han did not place too much importance on this dragon transformation technique. He was a cultivator of the indestructible heaven scroll, which was superior to the Tao of heaven and earth, and was the strongest and most powerful technique in this world. However, the installation of dragon chi into his body still granted him great benefits. Moreover, when the dragon transformation technique has been cultivated to the highest level, one would be able to form the chi of the immortal dragon inside his body. One streak of chi would be equivalent to a full force blow from an immortal dragon. However, the dragon chi is too hard to cultivate, and would be gone once you have used it in an attack. You would have to start accumulating it from the beginning again. Additionally, the quantitative limit of dragon chi would also be restricted by the space inside the dantian. One could not possibly accumulate it continuously without end. Ordinarily, a first heaven celestial king would be able to cultivate a streak of dragon chi, and fifth heaven means 5 streaks, while ninth heaven would be 9 streaks. Ling Han read the information of the dragon transformation technique, and nodded slowly. For him, the dragon transformation technique was not particularly significant, but the dragon chi that he could eventually cultivate was not too bad, as it could increase his explosive power. His body danced in the air, completely beyond his control. Dragon chi entered his body, improving Ling Han's physique in all aspects, but in truth, this improvement was not very great, because Ling Han had already cultivated every cultivation level to perfection, and the effect of the dragon chi was negligible. Instead, the 9 source powers of heaven and earth within his body became livelier, greedily absorbing this dragon chi. They were nurtured from the heaven and earth, and naturally also relied on the heaven and earth. This dragon chi only possessed the shape of a dragon, but was actually the source power of the heaven and earth, which was naturally beneficial to strengthening the source powers of heaven and earth. For the Empress and Hunyeo, the dragon chi pouring into their bodies could possibly double their strength or even triple it, but for Ling Han, it would already be good enough if it could increase his strength by 1%. However, he had already ground his battle prowess to the pinnacle of the dividing soul tier, and to say nothing of increasing his strength by 100th upon this basis, even if it was just an increase of a 10,000th, it would still be incredibly difficult. With this comparison, it was clear how powerful the power of heaven and earth was. He descended from the skies, and when he landed on a plane, the dragon chi had also been fully absorbed. Die! An attack was already flying towards him. Ling Han looked up, and it was actually Zhang Fei. He wielded a silver spear in his hands, and at this time, every seal was already glowing brightly as he stabbed his spear towards Ling Han. Previously, Ling Han had stopped them from committing murder, and now they were going to kill Ling Han. On the other side, the Rain Emperor was already fighting with Feng Xingren and the others, but in a battle of 1 against 5, he had naturally fallen into a disadvantage. Thankfully, the Empress and Hu Niu moved in time, and managed to hold 4 of them back, allowing the Rain Emperor and Feng Xingren to battle one-on-one. At this time, how terrifying the Rain Emperor was could clearly be seen. Even if he was a minor level inferior to Feng Xingren, and the latter was a great monarch tier, the former was still capable of fighting the latter to a stalemate. His battle prowess powerful to a heaven-defying extent. Cheng Zixin, Fu Zhou, and Yan Xianlu were all watching in shock. No wonder the other man could become Ling Han's second brother. This battle prowess was truly astonishing. Even An Ran had forgotten to attack. She only knew that the Rain Emperor was very strong, but when all their cultivation levels were suppressed, the extent of their freakishness was also shrunk down. Only now did she know that the Rain Emperor could actually be as strong as this. Ling Han's brow wrinkled in a frown, and he glanced at Zhang Fei. Then, he indifferently threw out a punch. Pooh! Zhang Fei instantly exploded into a shower of blood from the impact of this punch. At first, Cheng Zixin and the others were already gaping with shock, and now they felt their scalps go numb. Zhang Fei was their equal, and was in fact even slightly stronger than them, but in front of Ling Han, he exploded just from the force of a single punch. Just how wide was the gap in power between the two of them? And they actually said that they wanted to spar with Ling Han. This was practically a joke. No wonder Yi thought so highly of Ling Han. So that was the case. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, how could they possibly imagine that a heaven soul could actually be as strong as this? Yulan Fenghua's pupils also dilated in shock. This kind of heaven soul was really too terrifying, being able to insta-kill a monarch tier of the same cultivation level with a single blow. If he was honest with himself, it would definitely be impossible for him to do the same if he was sent back to heaven's soul. And precisely because of this, his killing intent fell completely beyond his control. If he did not kill Ling Han now, then when the latter advanced to the immortal palace tier, he probably would be dying in defeat. Subconsciously, his feet were already moving. Ha ha ha! A loud laugh rang out and pang! A figure descended from the skies. A terrifying aura surged out, causing a chill to rise from the depths of everyone's hearts. Ling Han's eyes swept over this newcomer, and his pupils involuntarily dilated. Ji Wuming. There was no longer any restriction of cultivation level here. Ji Wuming spread out his aura without any reservations. He was clearly only a heaven soul, yet was even more domineering than any celestial king. Ji Wuming's expression was filled with evil. His eyes swept over the gathered masses. Not bad, not bad. There is also a large amount of source power of heaven and earth on you. It would be a waste on you people, so you should just contribute it to me. He moved aggressively, paying no concern to who his opponent was, and just simply killed a man, then feeding on him forcefully. In this manner, he had naturally become a public enemy. Murder, feeding on the corpse, what was this? Let's work together and destroy him, someone called out loudly, encouraging others to join forces. Meanwhile, some had turned and fled. Even if they won this kind of battle, what would be the point? There was not the slightest benefit to be gained. Ling Han also moved in a hurry, drawing all the women into the Black Tower. Faced with Ji Wuming, he was only certain that he could stand against him, but did not think that he would be able to protect the women at the same time. It was the same the other way round. Ji Wuming, too, could not possibly protect the lives or life of someone while he was barraged by Ling Han's offensive. Ji Wuming moved like lightning. With a tremble of his figure, 9 divided souls surged from his body, and began a massacre. As expected, he, too, had formed 9 divided souls. The present Ji Wuming's cultivation level was comparable to first secret immortal palace tier, and his battle prowess had surged directly to peak stage 4th secret, which was incredibly terrifying. Run, 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 everyone, run. After Ling Han drew the women into the Black Tower, he had no other worries. Thus, he turned and ran towards Ji Wuming, wanting to stop his random slaughter. However, he had just moved when he felt a force directed at the back of his head. The person who had made this move was Yulan Fenghua. Chapter 2192. Celestial Killer Spear. Ling Han involuntarily humphed. This Yulan Fenghua was really very petty to actually make a move on him at this time, and it was a sneak attack at that. How despicable. Without even turning his head, he greeted the incoming blow with a punch of his own. Boom! A frightening light burst out, as if the heavens were collapsing. Yulan Fenghua paled in shock. Ling Han had actually dissipated his strike. He was but a mere heaven soul. How could he possibly be so strong? Yulan Fenghua looked at Ji Wuming again. This madman was also killing first secret, second secret, and third secret elites like he was chopping vegetables. She was the same kind of freak as Ling Han. How could there be such freaks in this world, and to have two of them pop up at the same time? Brother Yulan, this is your so-called spar? Ling Han asked calmly. This was completely a sneak attack. Yulan Fenghua looked embarrassed. At first, he had planned to kill Ling Han with a single blow, ending all his future worries. Who would have thought that Ling Han would actually be so freakish? He was clearly only a heaven soul, yet his battle prowess could match that of Yulan Fenghua, who was a first secret monarch tier. And now with Ling Han mocking him directly, he was naturally extremely displeased, and wanted nothing more than to kick Ling Han to the other side of the world so that he could then escape from this awkward situation. He hardened his heart. In this present situation, it was worse the more he spoke. He might as well just remain silent. Ji Wuming was committing mass slaughter, and appeared to be planning to massacre all of them, and he only had to kill Ling Han. Then, all his actions today would naturally be known to no one. Ling Han, you should die now. He charged out again. In his eyes, though Ling Han was very freakish, he was still just a heaven soul no matter how freakish he was, and he himself was a first secret monarch tier. As long as he went all out, it would definitely be him winning. Laws have no bounds. He channeled a powerful attack, its might soaring to the heavens. He was the holy son of the Imperial Void sect, and was the personal disciple of the Imperial Void Celestial King at that. Not only did he have a grasp of many celestial techniques, their might was also incredibly strong. This laws have no bounds was a secret technique that he could only use after advancing to the Immortal Palace tier, and was endlessly strong. Boom! It was as if he had become the ruler of the heavens. His palm descended, capable of piercing through the heavens, directly striking onto the underworld. This attack was quite strong, Ling Han thought internally, yet was completely unafraid. Using fists of fury, he launched his own attack at that massive palm. Pang! The fist blasted onto that colossal palm, and did not even pause before directly penetrating the palm and striking out. The power of regulation vibrated, instantly covering the entire palm. Then, this gargantuan palm collapsed and crumbled. Ling Han's fist was aimed straight for Yulan Fenghua. Yulan Fenghua quickly leaped up, dodging this blow, his expression filled with absolute disbelief. He had shot out a powerful attack, and not only had he not managed to suppress Ling Han, it had instead been destroyed with a single punch from the latter. He was just a mere heaven soul, and was actually even stronger than Yulan Fenghua, who was a first secret monarch tier. How was this possible? Though his heart was astounded, he still summoned a battle spear without hesitation. With a wave of his hands, wang, 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 multiple seals on the battle spear lit up, exuding a terrifying aura. He declared arrogantly, "This is the weapon my master used in the Immortal Palace tier. Though it is not a celestial tool, it has been instilled with my master's invincible fighting spirit. This spear's name is Celestial Killer." Celestial Killer? How arrogant. The strongest in the celestial realm were celestials, but the Imperial Void Celestial King actually named this spear as Celestial Killer? Just what kind of lofty ambition was that? Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, "Unfortunately, your master is your master, and you are you. There is no way the two of you can be talked about in the same breath." "Nonsense, I will definitely be the second coming of my master in future," Yulan Fenghua declared loudly. "You won't be." Ling Han shook his head. "You haven't even cultivated dividing 9 souls dividing soul tier to perfection, and are merely mediocre." Small Tower's assessment of the Imperial Void Celestial King was that the latter was qualified to ascend to the Heavenly Venerable tier. Then, this person had to have formed 9 divided souls. Yulan Fenghua had not formed 9 divided souls, and wanted to become the second Imperial Void Celestial King. Wasn't that just being delusional? After your death, I will carve the word mediocre onto your grave. Yulan Fenghua charged out, wielding his spear. The tip of the spear was flowing with endless sharp violence. It was clearly no celestial tool, yet seemed to be even more powerful than any celestial tool. This was because there was no immortal palace tier that could fully activate the full might of a celestial tool. On the contrary, the might of 5 stars and 6-star pseudo-celestial tools could be fully released in the hands of an immortal palace tier. It was just how techniques did not differ in strength. The strongest technique would be the one that was suited to one. Boom! The piercing attack shot forwards, its vicious might soaring to the heavens. This was not just the combined force of Yulan Fenghua and the celestial killer spear. It also included the invincible intent that the Imperial Void Celestial King had previously left behind in the celestial killer spear. He had a chance of becoming a heavenly Venerate, so what did that signify? At that time, the Imperial Void Celestial King had to be a prodigy of the same strength as Ling Han and Ji Wuming, or perhaps even slightly stronger than them. It was rumored that he had cultivated the severing mundane tier to the point that he could deliver no further strikes, and only then did he advance into the dividing soul tier. Which also meant that even though Yulan Fenghua had only pierced forwards with a spear, it was equivalent to the full-force blow of Yulan Fenghua, the Imperial Void Celestial King, and a 6-star pseudo-celestial tool all combined. Ling Han looked intrigued. Of course, his interest was not directed at Yulan Fenghua, but rather at the Imperial Void Celestial King. To be exact, it was towards the Imperial Void Celestial King when he had still been in the Immortal Palace tier. Ling Han wanted to battle the Imperial Void Celestial King in this proxy manner. Raising his fist, he charged towards the Celestial Killer Spear in attack. Pooh! A stream of blood gushed out, and Ling Han's fist was immediately dripping with blood. Ha ha ha, with your mere body of flesh and blood, you actually dare to stand against the Celestial Killer Spear. You are merely asking for your own suffering. Yulan Fenghua smirked coldly. Meanwhile, Ling Han looked at his fist. The source power of wood activated, and the wound immediately recovered at a visibly fast rate. Though this still contained the martial intent of the Imperial Void Celestial King, as well as the destructive power of a 6-star pseudo-celestial tool, the source power of wood was at the Celestial King tier. It was naturally easy for it to dissipate these factors. It was now very hard for his physique to further improve in strength. He would need an ocean's worth of natural treasures working together with the indestructible Heaven Scroll to be able to improve his physique further. Imperial Void Celestial King truly lives up to his reputation. Ling Han nodded, showing a solemn expression. Though he had only glimpsed the tip of the iceberg, the Imperial Void Celestial King definitely had to be world-shakingly powerful when he had been in the Immortal Palace tier to be able to just have a sliver of vicious intent explode, and cause even Ling Han's physique to be outmatched. After all, Ling Han presently was only equivalent to First Secret, and had not really advanced into the Immortal Palace tier yet. Yulan Fenghua was furious. Ling Han actually overlooked him completely, and the more he praised the Imperial Void Celestial King as extraordinary, the further he looked down on him. The might of my master naturally shakes the whole world, so how could you possibly look up to him? Yulan Fenghua declared arrogantly. You will become the dust of history soon. Ling Han chuckled and replied, if it had been the Imperial Void Celestial King from that time, I would definitely have battled him gladly. Too bad, you are too weak, so you are not even qualified to incite my fighting spirit. Only this spear is worthy of my interest in playing with it. Yulan Fenghua trembled with fury. He was a super monarch tier, and it had always been him calling the shots and looking down on all the other prodigies of the world, yet now he was actually treated with such utter contempt. Only the spear in his hands was worthy of Ling Han's interest to play around. You can just continue to speak tough, but you will very soon regret, and find out just how terrifying I can be in my fury. He calmed down, and practically spat out each word, his killing intent boiling over. Ling Han cracked a smile. Oh, scowling? Die! Yulan Fenghua could no longer bear it. With a battle cry, his figure charged out, the Celestial Killer Spear sweeping out in attack, its murderous aura surging to the heavens. Chapter 2193. Joining Forces Again. Yulan Fenghua was indeed very strong. A super monarch tier was not just a mere empty boast, and he was also acclaimed as the second coming of the Imperial Void Celestial King. This assessment was extremely high. The Celestial Killer Spear was even more terrifying, and was the pseudo-celestial tool that the Imperial Void Celestial King had previously used, instilled with his invincible fighting spirit and will. Even just a sliver would shake the heavens and quake the earth. More importantly, the Celestial Killer Spear was a 6-star pseudo-celestial tool, and could match any 5th secret elite or even monarch tier. This was terrifying. Ling Han was indeed very freakish, but he had not reached the extent at which he could stand against a 5th secret monarch tier. Thus, under the powerful offensive of the Celestial Killer Spear, he was forced into continuous retreat, and there would occasionally be blood spraying out. If it were not for the fact that his physique and recovery ability were both freakish, he would have long since been killed by the Celestial Killer Spear. Yulan Fenghua laughed loudly. He had finally pushed his enemy into such a sorry state, which made him feel incredibly satisfied and pleased. This spear is not too bad. A compliment rang out, and Ji Wuming leaped over, his eyes focused on the Celestial Killer Spear in a burning gaze. He was clearly just a heaven soul, but Yulan Fenghua still felt a powerful chill. It was like the other man was not a weakling that was inferior to him by a major tier, but rather a high and noble celestial king that was capable of even being his master's equal. He hurriedly shook his head, and expelled this chill from his body. What does it have to do with you? He withdrew his spear for the moment. I'd like to study it for a bit, Ji Wuming said smilingly. Just as he was speaking, his 9 divided souls had killed just about everyone in the vicinity, and returned to him. Boom, his aura immediately rose to a new level, and even Yulan Fenghua felt an involuntary urge to kneel in worship. The strongest state of the dividing soul tier would definitely be when all the divided souls had returned into their body, and the individual battle prowess would reach the strongest level. However, against multiple enemies, having divided souls split out would achieve a better result. Having felt the pressure of the Celestial Killer Spear, even Ji Wuming had withdrawn all his 9 divided souls, which showed that he was quite wary of this pseudo-celestial tool. In your dreams, Yulan Fenghua smirked coldly. What was going on with this world? A mere dividing soul tier actually dared to provoke an immortal palace tier, and a 1st secret monarch tier at that. Yet, there were as many as 2 such people who did not know what was good for them, and actually did have this kind of strength. Ji Wuming looked towards Ling Han, his gaze holding a killing intent that could not be concealed, and asked, Ling Han, why don't we join forces again? You want the spear? Ling Han asked. You already have the precious treasure of a heavenly Venerate, and this spear is completely useless to you. As for me, I just want to study it. After all, the Imperial Void is that old guy's disciple, Ji Wuming said. All right. Ling Han nodded. Indeed, he only wanted to battle with the Celestial King tier will within the Celestial Killer Spear, but did not covet this previous tool all that much. Yulan Fenghua was both furious and shocked. These 2 people actually dared to covet the Celestial Killer Spear, and were completely overlooking him. However, hearing the tone of these 2 people, it seemed as if they both knew the existence of the Heavenly Venerable tier. It should be known that even he had just found out that there was such a supreme level in the celestial realm not too long ago, and had even been granted an audience with the sealed emotion Heavenly Venerable, wherein the latter had carelessly given him some guidance, and it was enough to completely transform him, and increase his battle prowess 3 times over. Yet now, a Heavenly Venerate from Ji Wuming's mouth was actually called an old guy, and Ling Han now even possessed the precious treasure of a Heavenly Venerable tier. Hiss, just what was going on with these 2 people? True, if it was not related to Heavenly Venerable tier, how could such a ridiculous occurrence like dividing soul tier being capable of standing against Immortal Palace tier happen? I understand now, that is dividing 9 souls. Yulan Fenghua suddenly exclaimed. He previously had thought that Ji Wuming had only been using a cultivation technique, manifesting 9 doppelgangers, and had not even considered the idea of dividing 9 souls. It was only now that his heart suddenly trembled wildly as he thought of this possibility. That was because there was also one such freak in the sealed emotion palace. He clearly had been cultivating for a shorter period of time than him, yet even he could only kneel down in submission. In front of such a freak, he was as insignificant as an ant. And now, this kind of feeling had come back to him again. Fortunately, the freak in the sealed emotion palace had a higher cultivation level than him, so he did not even have the slightest extravagant hopes, but these 2 people in front of him were both inferior to him by a whole major tier, And he also possessed a deadly weapon like the celestial killer spear in his hands, so he had enough confidence that he could face these two freaks. Hold on, Ling Han must also have cultivated to the dividing 9 souls. He was overcome with jealousy because Ling Han previously had clearly been inferior to him, yet now the latter had completely left him behind in the dust, and this was completely displeasing to him. Let's make our move, Ji Wuming said to Ling Han. If it were not due to the celestial killer spear, he would have been able to easily kill a garbage like Yulan Fenghua. Ling Han nodded. Since Yulan Fenghua now knew that he possessed the precious treasure of a heavenly venerate, and the latter also had an extremely strong link with the sealed emotion heavenly venerable, it was naturally impossible that he could allow him to leave this place alive. The two of them had joined forces before. Though they were opposed to one another, their level of coordination was extremely high. Xiao, the two of them moved from the left and right side, respectively, charging towards Yulan Fenghua. Boom, a boundless brilliance surged from their hands, descending downwards on Yulan Fenghua. Scram! Yulan Fenghua shouted loudly, waving his spear in a wide sweep, and exuding impressive might. The celestial killer spear was too powerful. In the past, the Imperial Void Celestial King had to also have cultivated up to dividing 9 souls, and this was a pseudo-celestial tool that he had tempered to the level of the 5th secret. Just how terrifying was this powerful weapon? Thus, even if Ling Han and Ji Wuming had joined forces, so what? They would definitely be suppressed by Yulan Fenghua and left at a complete disadvantage. Yet Yulan Fenghua did not bear the slightest bit of pride in his expression. If their cultivation levels were all equal, and he could suppress 2 super freaks, it would be proof that his strength was more powerful. But now, the present situation was that Ling Han's and Ji Wuming's cultivation level was inferior to his, and he just gained the upper hand by depending on the celestial killer spear. If they all did not depend on their celestial tools, then he would not even be a match for Ling Han or Ji Wuming individually. This caused his expression to become livid, and the killing intent in his heart surged endlessly. If that was the case, he would then kill both of these freaks, and then there would be no need for him to suffer such embarrassment. Die! The celestial killer spear danced wildly. Yulan Fenghua was like a god of war, completely enjoying the upper hand. Heaven's souls would ultimately only be heaven's souls, he declared disdainfully. Ling Han humphed, and finally released a powerful move. The great clash of source powers channeled, and boom, he shot out a shock wave forwards. Endless seals flickered, filled with destruction. Wang, the celestial killer spear shone, and formed a shield of light in front of Yulan Fenghua, protecting him completely. However, the power of the great clash of source powers was too overwhelming. Even if Yulan Fenghua was protected by the celestial killer spear, he was still sent sliding back about 500 meters before he finally stopped, leaving behind 2 deep tracks of footprints on the ground. Ha ha ha! When the shield of light dispersed, Yulan Fenghua burst into laughter. This strike from Ling Han caused a chill to rise up from his very soul. But the celestial killer spear truly lived up to being the pseudo-celestial tool that the Imperial Void Celestial King had used years ago. It was capable of both defense and offense, and showed the brilliance of the pinnacle limits of the Immortal Palace tier in both aspects. You are both but clay chickens and pottery dogs, he declared in an act of disdain, but in truth he was greatly jealous. Ji Wuming's figure flashed, and he already charged right in front of Yulan Fenghua. A character appeared on his forehead, turning into an eye that snapped open abruptly. Immediately, lotus flowers bloomed all around him. He tapped out a finger, and it was like the finger tap of a Buddha, transcending all mortality. Eternity tap! Yulan Fenghua suddenly exclaimed in shock. Clay chickens and pottery dogs is a Chinese proverb that means someone is absolutely useless. Chapter 2194 Buddha Sun. Yulan Fenghua was extremely astounded. The Eternity Tap was the ultimate technique of the Buddhist sect. The Buddhist sect was a colossal force, and the founder of the sect, the 9 Lights Ancient Buddha, had long since disappeared without a trace. It was said that he had died, but his 3 disciples were still supporting the banner of the Buddhist sect. The 3 of them were all known as Buddha Kings, and 2 of the Buddha Kings had reached the height of the 9th Heaven Celestial King, and the last was an 8th Heaven Celestial King, who was said to also have hopes of advancing into the 9th Heaven. Even the Imperial Void sect would have to give some face to this kind of great sect. Yulan Fenghua had also previously exchanged blows with a Buddha son of the present generation. The latter's amazing techniques were like a deluge of heavenly flowers, causing him to gasp in amazement, and think that this was an extraordinary genius that was withdrawn from worldly affairs, and could even compare with that freak from the sealed emotion palace. And what stunned him the most at that time was the eternity tap move that the Buddha son, Xueqi, had used. This tap made him know what gap lay between the two of them, and had been branded in his mind since. Every time he thought about it, he would shudder with fear. The eternity tap was the true core secret technique of the Buddhist sect. The might executed would be different depending on the user's cultivation level. One would have to comprehend the Buddha heart to be able to use it. Legend had it that the 9 lights ancient Buddha had once used the eternity tap to kill a 9th heaven celestial king. Yet now, this secret technique that would not be taught to outsiders was actually seen being used by Ji Wuming. Could it be that the latter was an heir of the Buddhist sect? Impossible. The moment one joined the Buddhist sect, all their hair would be removed. They were all bald, and there was not one that was like Ji Wuming now. Boom, when this finger tapped towards him, the 6 samsara realms all opened, evolving into the 6 samsara realms of reincarnation. Yulan Fenghua was even more astounded. That was because while Ji Wuming's present cultivation level was inferior to that of Xueqi, but merely in terms of the level of mastery of eternity tap, it was actually Ji Wuming that was superior. How was this possible? Boom, it was still the celestial killer spear that showed its might, sending out a frightening attack that cancelled out the eternity tap. So what if you are a Buddha son? Yulan Fenghua laughed after faltering for a moment. The eternity tap was a great shadow in his heart, but now this tap was completely useless in front of him, which gave him a great feeling of satisfaction all of a sudden. The two of you, I will send you to the afterlife today. Ling Han shook his head. Ji Wuming, if there was a list for those I'm the most unwilling to die together with, you would definitely be ranked on top of my list. Yet Ji Wuming thought seriously for a moment, and finally said, you can only be ranked 5th on mine. There may come a day when we would die, but it would definitely not be today, and furthermore, definitely not in the hands of trash like you, Ling Han said to Yulan Fenghua, his expression filled with disdain. Death is already at your doorstep, and you are still talking tough? Yulan Fenghua was extremely furious. Brandishing the celestial killer spear, he sent out an incredibly terrifying strike. At the same time, he was also rousing the celestial killer spear, preparing to unleash a powerful attack that was harsh beyond compare. Both Ling Han and Ji Wuming moved as fast as lightning, dodging the attack of the celestial killer spear on one side, while also unleashing a counterattack so that they could speed up the exhaustion of the energy within the celestial killer spear. When cultivators had completely worn themselves out in battle, they could ingest alchemical pills to recover their origin power, but there was no way a pseudo-celestial tool could do the same. Thus, Ling Han and Ji Wuming's strategy was to expend the energy inside the celestial killer spear. As long as it was fully expended, then the celestial killer spear would only be a weapon that had been forged from 6 stars pseudo-divine metal. This was a stupid method, but it could not be helped. Who asked the celestial killer spear's level to be too high? Thankfully it was the two of them. If it was any other heaven soul, to say nothing of heaven soul, even if it was a 4th secret or 5th secret elite, they would only be kneeling immediately in the face of the celestial killer spear. Not only were Ling Han and Ji Wuming capable of contending with it, they could even possibly win. What else could be asked of them? Yulan Fenghua naturally knew this as well. That was why he had begun his preparation for unleashing a powerful move, planning to take down both Ling Han and Ji Wuming in a single strike. World destruction. He had already accumulated enough power, and suddenly stabbed the celestial killer spear strongly into the ground. Boom, a golden light spread out, extending continuously in all directions, and wherever the golden light passed, the ground would immediately be turned into metal, reflecting a dazzling brilliance. A chill immediately rose up in Ling Han. He felt that if he was touched by this golden light, then his body would instantly turn into metal. However, the source power of metal in his body was exuding a strong intent, seemingly filled with longing for this energy. Thinking so, he dismissed the idea of entering into the Black Tower. The golden light swept past, and he was instantly turned into a golden statue, standing erect on the golden ground. On the other side, the character once again appeared on Ji Wuming's forehead, and his body was also shining brilliantly, as if the attack delivered by the celestial killer spear had engulfed him ahead of time. The golden light rippled over 50 kilometers before finally stopping, and everything within this diameter had been turned golden, becoming a world of metal. Yulan Fenghua pulled out the celestial killer spear, suddenly laughing loudly. He had destroyed 2 powerful enemies in a single stroke, causing every pore on his body to open up, feeling extremely gratified and pleased. However, his smile very soon disappeared. The metallic aspect of Ling Han's body was gradually retreating at a very fast pace. And Ji Wuming was even more astonishing. He directly walked out in that metallic body, as if he was a golden Buddha. Fuck! Yulan Fenghua was so shocked that his eyes almost popped out of his head. He had unleashed a powerful move, but this was the result. The two of them. Were they really human? Ling Han laughed. This move is very comfortable, so just do it again. He was not the one feeling the comfort, but rather the source power of metal, which had swallowed the regulations of metal that had been shot out by the celestial killer spear to nurture itself. Again. Yulan Fenghua shook his head internally. To say nothing of the fact that it was useless against Ji Wuming and Ling Han, and unleashing a second world destruction was equivalent to wasting energy, it was also impossible for him to do it again. That was because the celestial killer spear could only unleash the world destruction once in a short period of time. The seals on the spear that had been activated with much difficulty had all dimmed, and now there were only a rare few that were still glowing, its might greatly reduced. Humph! Ji Wuming stepped out of the state of golden Buddha he was in, but his aura was not weakened in the slightest. Instead, it had become even more terrifying, with demonic chi surging to the heavens. It was as if he had suddenly turned from a great Buddha that would save the world into a demon master that was intent on destroying the world. He charged towards Yulan Fenghua, sending out a palm strike, fierce flames billowing. Ling Han was not reserved, either. He primarily used the fists of fury, and would occasionally use the great clash of source powers. As for the divine demon sword, he did not summon it. This was still only a 4-star pseudo-celestial tool. If it clashed forcefully with the celestial killer spear, it would only be broken. Yulan Fenghua's heart became colder and colder. Aside from having astonishing battle prowess, both Ji Wuming and Ling Han also had frighteningly strong defenses. Even if he was completely enjoying the upper hand, so what? There was no way that he could turn his upper hand into a victory. Gritting his teeth, he suddenly twisted the spear, planning to cut out a path of blood. Inescapable net. With a wave of his right hand, Ji Wuming tossed out a large net that moved to enshroud Ji Wuming. Yulan Fenghua humphed, and wielded his spear to pierce that gigantic net. In his eyes, this large net would naturally immediately collapse with a strike of the celestial killer spear, but the truth was completely contrary to his expectations. This piercing attack only caused the large net to slightly open a bit, but it did not break, possessing incredible elasticity and sturdiness. Yulan Fenghua was involuntarily dumbstruck. This was the celestial killer spear, and it actually could not pierce open this large net. Meanwhile, Ji Wuming turned his head, and smiled at Ling Han. I had initially prepared this for you. Fuck! Samsara in Buddhism refers to the beginningless cycle of repeated birth, mundane existence, and dying again. Chapter 2195. Divine Sense of a Heavenly Venerate. Ji Wuming had always wanted to kill Ling Han, and snatch the precious treasure of the Heavenly Venerate from him. He was definitely an anti-hero. If he wanted something, he would express that want frankly, and would not deliberately put on any pretenses. That was the style of a vile character. The reason he had prepared this so-called net was actually Ling Han. Once he was captured by the net, he would be just like Yulan Fenghua, who was yet unable to pierce through the net even with the celestial killer spear. Unfortunately, this net is only a one-use item. Ji Wuming shook his head in mild regret. Ling Han wanted to give him the middle finger, but these words were not completely trustworthy. God knew if Ji Wuming was simply lying to him, and luring him into carelessness. This person was an anti-hero. To achieve his motives, he could be unscrupulous. After sacrificing such a treasure, if I am still unable to take this spear, wouldn't my losses be too great? Ji Wuming charged out, continuing to barrage Yulan Fenghua with a powerful offensive. Yulan Fenghua had the protection of the celestial killer spear, and there was absolutely no risk to his life, but there was no way for him to escape, either. That net seemed to have been pinned down. No matter how Yulan Fenghua charged, he ultimately would still be bounced backwards by the elastic ropes of the net. This was truly a treasure. Ling Han watched with a heated gaze. If he had such a treasure, it would become extremely easy for him to snatch any kind of treasure in the future. Too bad. This treasure was ultimately only for a single use. Furthermore, with Ji Wuming's strength, the chances of snatching a treasure from his hands were practically zero. This was the same as how Ji Wuming had his eye on the Black Tower, and wanted to take it for himself, but had failed repeatedly. Their levels were already incredibly close. Either of them could possibly kill the other. Yulan Fenghua roared furiously. What use was it even if he had powerful battle prowess? The celestial killer spear could not tear through this net, and all of it was pointless. This was a very hopeless affair. It was clear that he had superior strength, yet he could only submissively wait for death like this. Ling Han also charged over, joining forces with Ji Wuming, and speeding up the exhaustion of energy inside the celestial killer spear. Just as it looked like all the seals on the celestial killer spear were about to go dim, Yulan Fenghua's expression twisted completely, and he roared in fury, "Since the two of you are so determined to seek death, let us die together then." He spat out strange syllables from his mouth, and the meaning could not be distinguished when they were spoken together. However, the heaven and earth suddenly changed. Dark clouds rolled out, and lightning flashed. Oh no! This trash is reciting the true name of the sealed emotion Heavenly Venerable. With his cultivation level, there is no way he could sustain the descent of a sliver of thought from a Heavenly Venerate, but we would be exposed to the eyes of that old guy, Ji Wuming said solemnly. A fierce expression appeared on his face. He truly deserves death. He is just trash, and will actually cause me to waste one of my trump cards. His fingers moved in hand seals. Wang, a golden Buddha, suddenly appeared behind him, which was followed by the second, the third, and so on. In total, 9 of them appeared, and surrounded Yulan Fenghua completely. The 9 golden Buddhas chanted Buddhist scriptures at the same time, surpassing all. With their chanting, Yulan Fenghua's voice was abruptly drowned out. It was not that the sound was too loud, completely overwhelming his voice, but rather was a suppression in terms of regulations. Wah! Yulan Fenghua threw up copious amounts of blood. Even if he had not completely recited the true name of a heavenly venerate, a sliver of intent was already mysteriously descending. This was something that his body could not possibly sustain. He looked dumbly forwards as his body began to crumble, suddenly turning into thousands of pieces. Quang! Thunder rang out loudly in the skies, and a rip suddenly opened in the void. An eye appeared, but it had not managed to sweep its vision downwards when it was struck by lightning. Pa! It directly vanished, and the rip in the void was instantly restored. The dark clouds dispersed, turning back into clear skies. Ji Wuming's expression was slightly pale. Using a powerful move to stop the descent of a sliver of intent of a heavenly venerate had been only a piece of cake for him in the past, yet now it caused him to pay quite an exorbitant price. The heavenly venerable tier has surpassed the heaven and earth, and is no longer recognized by the heaven and earth. He cannot easily show up. Ji Wuming actually explained the situation to Ling Han. It was rare that this 9th heaven celestial king of the past was willing to reveal some secrets, so Ling Han naturally grabbed the opportunity, and asked, "Isn't it said that the heavenly venerable tier has surpassed the heaven and earth? Even if the heavenly venerable tier is not recognized by the heaven and earth, so what?" Ji Wuming shook his head. The heavenly venerable tier has only surpassed regulations, and not the heaven and earth. Ling Han was slightly confused. Weren't the heaven and earth and regulations the same concept? Wrong. Ji Wuming shook his head. How could anyone be capable of conquering and surpassing the might of the heaven and earth? But as the heaven and earth channels, there is a need for some regulations to serve the heaven and earth. The regulations of heaven and earth can be altered, but the heaven and earth itself cannot. It would either exist or cease to exist. Ling Han thought for a moment, and said, "Can we use this metaphor then? The heaven and earth are father and mother, while the regulations are the child. We cultivators are grandchildren, so we have to adhere to the regulations, but in the case of heavenly venerable tier, they are equivalent to the illegitimate children of heaven and earth, and thus are equal to the regulations, yet they are envied by the regulations, and granted no recognition from the regulations." Ji Wuming chuckled. This metaphor is really a mess, but there is some logic to it. However, the regulations is birthed from the heaven and earth. A heavenly venerable tier has surpassed the regulations, and is similarly not recognized by the heaven and earth. However, the heaven and earth cannot directly interfere, and can only act through regulations. That is why even regulations can do nothing against heavenly venerable tier. Going by your previous metaphor, the heavenly venerable tier should be considered as an unfilial child that has been cast out of the family, and can rule as a despot, yet ultimately it is still a member of this family. As he spoke, he stowed the celestial killer spear away. After paying such a heavy price, he had to have some profit. Ling Han did not stop him. Indeed, he did not have much interest in the celestial killer spear, and Ji Wuming had sacrificed more than he had. More importantly, Ling Han also hoped that Ji Wuming could become stronger. The stronger he was, the more it could motivate him so that he would not slack off or relax. If there came a day when he suddenly had no rival, he would definitely be extremely bored, and have no further desire to improve his cultivation level. That was because no matter how strong he became, so what? He would already be at the top. Ling Han, when I have digested the source power of heaven and earth, I will battle you again. Ji Wuming laughed loudly. Your life ultimately has to end in my hands. Hee hee. Ling Han only offered him a cold laugh. If he wanted a battle, he was pleased to oblige. What did he have to fear? Ji Wuming shot through the air, and very soon disappeared from sight. With so many people dying, powerful figures would be arriving shortly. If he did not leave, it would be too late. Though he was sure to have some means of fleeing from ascending origin tiers or even celestial kings, he ultimately would still have to make some sacrifices. What was the point of being stubborn now? Ling Han turned his head and looked over. The Rain Emperor, Hu Niu, and the others were still battling Zhang Fei, Feng Xingren, and their group fiercely. The Empress and Hu Niu had tied up 5 of them, merely staying on the defensive, and allowing the Rain Emperor to battle his opponent without reservations. The Rain Emperor was a cultivation prodigy. He had actually completely exhausted the benefits he had gained from his dragon transformation in battle, gradually increasing his battle prowess, and reaching a level that completely surpassed his opponent. Then, his viciousness came out in full play. In a few strikes, he beat his opponent into dust. Ling Han leaped over and said, "Second brother, I'll help you deal with a few of them. It would not be good to stay here too long." All right. The Rain Emperor was not the kind to show off. Him dealing with one opponent independently was already proof of his strength. There was no need for him to continue to duel the others. Retreat! 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 Zhang Fei and his group were all pale, and hurriedly called out for a retreat. Ling Han stretched out a hand. Boom! Regulations turned into a cage, imprisoning all 5 of them. Though I do not possess the inescapable net, I am still more than adequate to detain all of you here. Chapter 2196. Saintly Origin Academy. Ling Han moved. This was the suppression of the Immortal Palace tier against Dividing Soul tier. How could Zhang Fei and his group possibly be a match? In just an instant, all 5 of them were killed. They didn't even get the chance to use their trump cards. Let's go! Ling Han grabbed everyone. His figure flashed using the void space, and very quickly disappeared from sight. Only a few minutes after they had left did Ascending Origin tier elites come belatedly. They could only look at the blood pooled all over the ground, as well as the spiritual pieces that had not yet dissipated, screaming, and unwilling to return to the heaven and earth. However, this was destined to be wasted effort. Without a physical body, whole spirits could not linger for too long. What more when they were just pieces? After Ling Han traveled for a very long while, he finally let everyone down, including Yan Xianlu and the others. Ji Wuming had given him some face, and had not made a move on those close to him. Perhaps he, too, knew that if he'd made a move on these people, Ling Han would definitely have moved to stop him, and the both of them would have been embroiled in a fierce battle ahead of time. In that case, Ji Wuming naturally would not have been able to hunt down others. Brother Ling, do you have any plans of returning to the Eastern Celestial Realm after this? Yan Xianlu and the other prodigies from the Eastern Celestial Realm all asked. Ling Han shook his head. He was going to change his appearance after this, and enter into the Imperial Void Sect. His ultimate goal was the Sealed Emotion Palace. Hence, he naturally could not return to the Eastern Celestial Realm. Ling Han, we will wait for your return. The alliance cannot lack a leader, naturally, Cheng Zixin said. By now, he was completely impressed with Ling Han. That's right. Fu Zhou nodded as well. Ling Han thought for a moment. I will find the time to make a trip back to the Eastern Celestial Realm. Before this, I will leave the matter of the alliance to you guys. I hope that you all, together with Yi, can improve your cultivation levels as soon as possible because there is not much time left for us. He was not a selfish person. By then, he would let everyone into the Black Tower and enjoy the 100,000-fold time acceleration effects. Faced with the survival of the heaven and earth, all else could be set aside first. Yan Xianlu and the others agreed, and then left. They could not stay for too long. After all, they still needed celestial kings to take them back, and how could they make a celestial king wait for too long? Second brother, are you returning to the great majestic sect? Ling Han asked. I'm fine with either. In any case, I am roaming around in my travels all for the sake of becoming stronger, the Rain Emperor said very carelessly. Ling Han nodded. The two brothers had finally reunited after over 10,000 years spent apart. He did not want to immediately separate with the second brother, either. No matter what, they had to stay together for a while longer. Fourth brother, what are your plans? The Rain Emperor asked him instead. Ling Han naturally would not be hiding anything from the Rain Emperor, and spoke of how he was going to enter into the Imperial Void sect. Then second brother will go with you, the Rain Emperor replied. He, too, was extremely curious about Heavenly Venerable Tier, and saw it as a tall mountain that he wished to conquer. Wang, right at this moment, multiple streaks of celestial light suddenly flashed in the skies, which then led to the appearance of a decree. It was entwined by 9 streaks of celestial light, and then characters flashed out one after another. A boundless might spread out, as if it was the arrival of a celestial king, looking down on the mass of common people. A celestial king tier decree 1 that was written by a 9th heaven celestial king at that. Could it be that because Ji Wuming had committed mass slaughter, it had enraged a 9th heaven celestial king, and thus they'd written this decree as a warrant of arrest for him? At this time, those characters stopped moving, and turned into words. The calamity will soon arrive, and great changes will occur. To ignite the sparks of our celestial realm, the residual green flame celestial king, together with 21 9th heaven celestial kings, will establish the Saintly Origin Academy, nurturing exceptional prodigies to resist the storm of darkness that would be coming soon. Any who think themselves as having superior natural talent may advance to the Twin Horses Heavenly Realm, Li Shui City, where there will be someone in charge of selections. These words stayed for about an hour's time, and then the 9 streaks of colored light dispersed, completely disappearing without a trace. Instantly, the entire celestial realm was in an uproar. Right. This decree did not just appear above of Ling Han and his group, but rather in every corner of the celestial realm. Every single person of the eastern and western celestial realms could see Eidhaven if they were blind. This was regulations, and would directly enter into their mind's eye. No one doubted the authenticity of this decree, because the 9 streaks of celestial light were a symbol unique to 9th heaven celestial kings. And to say that any 9th heaven celestial king would be bored to the point of using this as a prank, even if they fell for this deception, they should be feeling honored. Ling Han and his group exchanged looks, a strong feeling of unease rising up in them. First, it was the heaven and earth that had broken their own rules, allowing the Dragon's Gate mountain to appear ahead of time, and next a considerable number of 9th heaven celestial kings had established an academy together, gathering the exceptional prodigies of the world, intent on standing against the storm of darkness. It should be known that before this, there were practically few that knew of the existence of the foreign realm, and that they were attempting to invade the celestial realm, and occupy this heaven and earth for their own. Though the decree had not clearly explained the origins of the storm of darkness, it had pointed out that the celestial realm was presently facing a great crisis. What could this mean? The time that the foreign realm invades us may be far sooner than we have expected. Ling Han pondered deeply. An unexpected change must have taken place in the two-realm passageway, causing this passageway to become even stabler, and also causing the celestial kings at the front lines to feel increased pressure, the Empress deduced. Hu Niu took a bite out of her chicken drumstick. No matter what comes, Niu will beat them all down. The Rain Emperor said, then we should first check this Saintly Origin Academy out. And everyone nodded in agreement. As many as 22 9th heaven celestial kings had moved together to set up an academy. Just how astounding was this? Merely in terms of backers, this had surpassed any great sect in this world. Alright, we'll first take a look at this saintly origin academy. Ling Han nodded as well. In this way, probably all the prodigies in the entire celestial realm would gather there. By then, he would be able to meet the most outstanding prodigies of the world. As for the Imperial Void sect, he'd just leave that for later. In any case, it would not be going anywhere. However, they did not immediately set out to the Twin Horses' heavenly realm, but rather went to find a mystery realm for severing mundane tier. Helian Xueqi and the other women had been improved in all aspects, and had the confidence that they could strike the heaven and earth to advance into the severing mundane tier. In the past, they had not dared to deliver this strike, not that they could not. Now, success would follow naturally when the conditions were right. Meanwhile, the Rain Emperor first went to break through to the Heaven Soul. They all promised to meet again at Xueqi city of the Twin Horses' heavenly realm. Thus, Ling Han brought the women with him, searching for the closest severing mundane tier mystery realm that would be opening soon. Their luck was not too bad. A severing mundane tier mystery realm would be opening 27 years later. They immediately made their way there. They spent over 3 years on the journey, then waited for another 20-odd years, and the women joined hands as they entered. Ling Han could not do anything to help here, and could only wait outside. Thankfully, 2 years later, not one of the women was missing, and they all walked out of the mystery realm. Furthermore, they had all broken through to the severing mundane tier. Ling Han naturally did not expect that they would all attain the 5th severance. It was already enough that they could successfully strike the heaven and earth. They then headed towards the Twin Horses' heavenly realm. This delay lasted over 2 decades, and in this time, a great many events had happened. The most sensational event was naturally the establishment of the Saintly Origin Academy. It was indeed set up by over 29th Heaven Celestial Kings in cooperation, and those that would be enrolling were all exceptional prodigies of the generation. However, this was not just limited to cultivation. Prodigies of alchemy, geniuses of formations, and skilled artisans would also be included. As long as they had one particular field of expertise, they all had a chance of enrolling into the academy. But no matter the case, the most famous naturally would be cultivation prodigies. In these 20+ years' time, the Saintly Origin Academy had a few disciples whose names rang out loudly through the celestial realm, and it could practically be claimed that they were unknown to no one. Fuck. Ji Wuming actually managed to make his way in as well? Ling Han was dumbfounded. Chapter 2197. Deliberately Causing Difficulties. There were a few disciples of Saintly Origin Academy that were incredibly outstanding, and had become world-renowned in a short 20+ years' time. Ji Wuming, Shi Chanzi, Hong Huang, and Jia Lan were the foremost famous of them. It was said that they all had overwhelming battle prowess, and even the elites of the older generation were incredibly wary of them. Ling Han was not surprised that Ji Wuming could stand out among the rest, and become the most outstanding disciple of Saintly Origin Academy, but rather because this guy killed people like he was cutting grass, and innumerable prodigies had died in his hands, so how could he possibly be so successful in such a grandiose manner in the Saintly Origin Academy? However, these Shi Chanzi, Hong Huang, and Jia Lan could be mentioned on equal terms with Ji Wuming, which means that their strength is definitely in no way inferior to Ji Wuming's. This is very frightening. Ling Han mumbled. Freaks like himself and Ji Wuming should only rarely appear in Epic Zone had obtained the precious treasure of a heavenly Venerate, while the other was a reincarnated 9th Heaven Celestial King. This was too unique. But upon further thought, wasn't the Rain Emperor also very freakish? The Rain Emperor could form 9 divided souls, so why couldn't there be others that could do the same? Ling Han's fighting spirit involuntarily blazed. He had always considered Ji Wuming as his only rival, but now there were another 3 heaven-defying freaks, and he very much longed to have a battle with these people. Ling Han had not wasted his time in these 20+ years. He had practically spent all of it cultivating inside the Black Tower, tempering the dividing soul tier to an incredibly sturdy extent before he would attempt to break through to the Immortal Palace tier. If he wanted to become the strongest, his foundations definitely had to be very firm and stable. He definitely could not act with undue haste. 20-odd years wasn't much. Ling Han surmised that he would probably need another 100 years to be able to polish dividing soul tier to a faultless extent, and this naturally was in real time. Put in the Black Tower, this period of time would be astonishingly long. He had not made any breakthrough in cultivation, but in alchemy, Ling Han saw some hope. He was only a step away from 7th refinement. In 10 years at most, I will definitely achieve 7th refinement, he said with a nod. Mainly, it was because he had too few celestial medicines, and you couldn't make bricks without straws. It could not be helped. Celestial medicines were celestial medicines. Even if they weren't very old, they were still extremely rare to come by. I'll find second brother first, then head to the Saintly Origin Academy. With so many Ninth Heaven Celestial Kings working together, their goal probably isn't just to nurture a few more Ninth Heaven Celestial Kings, but rather heavenly venerable tiers, Ling Han mumbled to himself. It can be imagined just how astonishing the cultivation resources of the Saintly Origin Academy would be, and even celestial medicines would be freely given, the Empress said. Niu wants to eat. Hu Niu shouted loudly. Ling Han laughed. All right, let's set out then. The majority had entered into the Black Tower, continuing to work hard on cultivation. Their cultivation levels were too low, and on long-distance journeys, they would greatly influence their speed. Thus, it was just Ling Han, the Empress, and Hu Niu that were traveling together. Spending another 3 years' time, they finally arrived at the Twin Horses' Heavenly Realm. After entering into the Twin Horses' Heavenly Realm, it was much faster for them to arrive at Xueqi City. They only spent half a month's time, and they already reached Xueqi City. As per usual, entering the city required payment of entrance fees, and for Ling Han, this was naturally not a big deal. Though the Empress and Hu Niu were both astoundingly beautiful, their presence was too strong, intimidating those gods to the point that they did not dare to say much, nor did they encounter any profligate young masters, so it was natural that they did not face much trouble. Thus, they eagerly entered into the city, and began asking around about the whereabouts of the Rain Emperor. Since they had separated, 30 years had already passed. Ling Han was sure that the Rain Emperor had long since broken through to the Heaven Soul, and had come to wait in this city. Ling Han felt that as long as the Rain Emperor had arrived first, this second brother of his would definitely find a way that he could use to find him. Why? The Rain Emperor was a man who had once been an emperor, and he had been a wise emperor at that. How could he possibly be incapable of accomplishing such a small task? Indeed, Ling Han only needed to make some queries, and discovered that 2 alchemical pill pharmacies had been newly opened in the city. One was called the Rain Imperial Pavilion, while the other was named Han Lin Pavilion. These 2 stores had to have been opened by the Rain Emperor, whose goal was to lure Ling Han over. As expected, the Rain Emperor had his ways. Ling Han made some queries. Because the Rain Imperial Pavilion was nearer, he naturally headed there. He went by himself, while Hu Niu and the Empress brought the other women shopping. The cities of the Celestial Realm were all like this. Though they were called cities, they were as large as planets, so even though the Rain Imperial Pavilion was nearer to Ling Han, it was still tens of thousands of km away. Thankfully, this was only the matter of a short while to the present Ling Han. Very soon, he arrived at a great city. In truth, this could only be called a town. No matter how big it was still a town. There naturally couldn't be a city within another city. He entered the town, and soon arrived at the Rain Imperial Pavilion. However, as his eyes swept over, he couldn't help but frown. The store was in a complete mess, tables and chairs collapsed. Many workers were either seated or lying down, all of them bearing traces of blood and bruised all over. Some had even broken limbs. Had someone just wreaked havoc here? Ling Han walked over and asked, "Where is your boss?" "Apologies, our store needs to rest and reorganize for a while, so please go elsewhere, honored customer." A middle-aged man approached him, and he was actually a severing mundane tear. However, there was a shocking black eye around his left eye. Clearly, he had been beaten by someone. Originally, he had quite a refined manner, but now he appeared extremely battered. Ling Han chuckled. "I am a friend of your boss." The middle-aged man glanced at Ling Han, and then an expression of dawning realization appeared on his face. "Dear customer, is your surname Ling?" "Ling Han." Ling Han nodded. "Please wait a moment." The middle-aged man immediately looked respectful. "My master has already received the news, and will be arriving soon. Please enter the store and have some tea first, honored guest." "All right," Ling Han agreed. He was just about to ascend to the second floor when over a dozen people suddenly burst in, all of them bearing expressions of malice. "Why are you back again?" the middle-aged man asked shakily, a clear expression of fear on his face. From the word again, it was clear that it was these people that had caused mass damage in the store previously, and had heavily beaten the staff as well. Ling Han's feet suddenly paused, and he turned to look at these people. These people were not weak, either. 7 of them had reached the Severing Mundane tier, while the others were Genesis tiers. In a 1-star city, this was already enough to establish a noble clan. Naturally here to collect money, a Severing Mundane tier sat down on the only chair that was still intact. "Haven't we just paid?" The middle-aged man appeared slightly angered. These people were without conscience. They had already collected their protection fees, yet still gave them a beating, destroying a great many items in the shop as well. The Severing Mundane tier that was seated was a large bearded man. Crossing his legs, he had the air of a ruffian. "What we previously collected was the protection fees for you opening a pharmacy. However, I heard that your place also conducts prostitution, so we have to collect another sum for that." Prostitution. The middle-aged man's mouth gaped. This is a pharmacy, so how could it possibly be related to prostitution? This was practically lying through his teeth, and deliberately bullying them. Ling Han turned around and descended the stairs, asking, "You are under someone's command, right? Come, tell me, who commanded you to do such a thing?" Small gangs collected protection fees, and Ling Han understood that, but something like this was already within the category of purposely causing trouble and making things difficult. The bearded man stared blankly and asked, "What nonsense are you spouting? Furthermore, who do you think you are?" Ling Han stretched out a hand, and everyone only felt their vision blur before the bearded man had fallen into Ling Han's hands. He smilingly asked, "You can choose either to talk or not to talk, but I have a fondness, and that is to tear people into pieces. Are you interested in giving it a try?" Chapter 2198. Young Master June. Involuntarily, the bearded man couldn't help but feel his heart go cold. He had not taken Ling Han to heart at all, but who would have thought that the latter would have such terrifying strength? With just a move, he had been captured as easily as blowing off dust. Just when he saw how Ling Han's gaze became vicious, he couldn't help but shiver and answer, "I'll talk. I'll talk. It's our gang leader that told me to come." "Oh, and who is your gang leader?" Ling Han asked smilingly. As he spoke, he clapped the bearded man's shoulder with each word. With every clap on his shoulder, the bearded man couldn't help but inhale sharply and exclaim in pain, his forehead producing cold sweat. "Our gang leader is Mao Haitao," the bearded man answered very simply and directly. Ling Han gave an "oh" and asked, "It can't be that your gang leader has gone crazy for no reason, and ordered that you people come and cause trouble, right?" The bearded man answered, "It's Lu Jun, young Master June, that sought out our gang leader, and asked that the gang leader step out for him to cause some trouble for the Rain Emperor." "Oh, and who is this Lu Jun?" Ling Han was slightly intrigued. "Young Master June," the bearded man dragged out his words, his whole person becoming smug, as if he was a completely changed person. However, when Ling Han clapped a hand on his shoulder, he immediately behaved, and answered, "Young Master June is a disciple of the Saintly Origin Academy." When he spoke the words, Saintly Origin Academy, even his eyes had grown bright. To the majority of residents of the Celestial Realm, Ninth Heaven Celestial King was naturally the strongest existence in the world, and the Saintly Origin Academy that had been founded by more than 29th Heaven Celestial Kings naturally was overwhelmingly awesome too. Any person that could enroll into the academy had to be a top-tier prodigy, and would definitely become a mighty figure in future. This Lu Jun was a disciple of Saintly Origin Academy, and naturally revered like a god by the bearded man. "Is he very strong?" Ling Han asked, smiling. Those prodigies like Yan Xianlu would definitely be qualified to enroll into Saintly Origin Academy, but they clearly were not the same level as Ji Wuming, Shi Chanzi, and the others, so which category did this Lu Jun belong to? Young Master June is from the Alchemy Institution. At a young age, he is already a 3-star alchemist, and has even attained 4th refinement in terms of sect brothers. It is said that he would definitely be able to achieve 5th refinement within the next 100 years, and become a 4-star alchemist. The bearded man boasted on behalf of Lu Jun, as if Lu Jun was his brother or son. "Alchemist. Ling Han suddenly understood why Lu Jun was targeting the Rain Imperial Pavilion. It was probably connected to alchemy. Then do you know why Lu Jun wants you to do this? The bearded man nodded and replied, Young Master Jun has his eye on the location of the Rain Imperial Pavilion and wants to buy this place to open up his own pharmacy, but the owner of this place refused. Thus, young Master Jun came up with this way, wanting to chase that owner away. Ling Han couldn't help but smirk coldly. The Rain Emperor naturally would not be selling the store here. This was the place for them brothers to reunite. Go back and tell that whatever young Master Jun to personally come and make his apologies within the next 3 days. Additionally, don't forget to pay for the losses experienced here. Even 1 less star stone would not be permitted. Ling Han turned back to the people in the shop. Everyone should be quite angered, right? Come, just act as you will. If any of them dares to fight back, I'll slaughter him. He then looked towards those ruffians, and wherever his eyes passed, those people would be trembling all over, as if their very souls were about to explode. The staff in the shop all exchanged looks for a while. At the beginning, none of them moved, but one of the braver ones finally walked out. Pang pang pang. Grabbing hold of one of the gang, he thrashed him harshly. True enough, that person did not dare to resist at all. He only used his arms to protect his head, and then bent his legs in to avoid any hits to vital areas. Seeing the situation, the remaining staff also became braver. Gradually, they all came out and beat them up. Being beaten up for no reason, who would not be angered? Previously, it was because they were outmatched, but now that they had someone to back them up, their internal fury naturally could be vented completely. When these staff had thrashed them to their heart's content, Ling Han finally let the bearded man and his group leave. All the staff were looking at Ling Han with admiring expressions, and felt like this man was practically a god to them. Ling Han's face bore a slight smile, and he even deliberately took out some alchemical pills, which he distributed among them so that they could heal their injuries. As he saw it, this was not just a place for him and the Rain Emperor to meet up, but could really be used as an actual alchemical pill pharmacy in the future because he himself was an alchemy prodigy. The Saintly Origin Academy had gathered the most outstanding prodigies of the entire celestial realm, and there were also as many as 22 Ninth Heaven celestial kings as their backers, so it would definitely attract a great many people over. Furthermore, those prodigies that enrolled into the academy would naturally be backed by various great sects as well. This was practically uniting all the great forces of the entire celestial realm in one place. It could be foreseen that this place would eventually become a very prosperous location, which would naturally give rise to endless business opportunities, representing a boundless wealth. At present, Ling Han still placed a high importance on wealth. It could not be helped. The divine demon sword was still only a 4-star pseudo-celestial tool. If he wanted to improve it further, he would naturally need a great amount of level 20 godly metal. This was all money, and the sum was incredibly terrifying. The fact that this place had caught Lu Jun's eye meant that it was a fortuitous location, so in the future, Ling Han would toss the alchemical pills that he had concocted here, and it naturally could bring an extremely great amount of wealth to him. He had never been one to suffer losses quietly. Since Lu Jun caused such a mess in this place, then he had to pay compensation. There would be no exception for him. In merely half a day's time, the Rain Emperor had returned. Fourth brother. Second brother. The Rain Emperor laughed loudly, striding over from the entrance. His aura surged like an incredibly terrifying ocean. Congratulations, second brother. You have successfully advanced to Heaven's Soul. Ling Han smiled, clasping his hands. The Rain Emperor smiled, and pulled Ling Han with him up the stairs. He brewed a pot of tea, and shared some tea with Ling Han. The two of them chatted for a while. Though the Rain Emperor had advanced into the Heaven's Soul, it had not been for a long time. Furthermore, there were only time cultivation chambers with 200x time acceleration effects in Lishui City. He had not even reached the peak stage of the Heaven's Soul, so he naturally could not have formed the 9 divided souls. Ling Han related his plans, and the Rain Emperor naturally would not make any objection. He merely told Ling Han to do as he willed, and then entered into the Black Tower. He wanted to form 9 divided souls as soon as possible. The Rain Emperor began to cultivate, and Ling Han summoned all the women. They then settled down in the Rain Imperial Pavilion. Then, they began to wait patiently for the arrival of that young Master Jun. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed, But that young Master June had still not appeared, right until the fourth day. A worker ran up and reported, "Young Master Lin, it's not good. Someone is blocking our doors and demanding to see the person in charge of the shop." Ling Han was just sipping tea with the Empress. They had all cultivated dividing soul tier to a practically flawless extent, so there would be no meaning to go into seclusion for further comprehension. Next, they had to wait for the opening of an Immortal Palace tier mystery realm, and then enter into it for their breakthrough to the Immortal Palace tier. Hence, they were all extremely idle now. Ling Han had placed his focus on alchemy as the doors to 7th refinement would be opening to him at any moment. "They're here?" Ling Han said smilingly to the Empress. At present, his alias was Han Lin, and he had also altered his appearance slightly. With the heaven-deceiving technique, which he had attained great accomplishment in, concealing his aura, even a 9th heaven celestial king would find it very difficult to distinguish his true appearance if they did not observe him closely. The Empress had also used the heaven-deceiving technique to alter her own appearance and aura. Though she was still captivatingly beautiful, she was not as stunningly exquisite as she had been. She nodded. "We'll know when we go downstairs and look for ourselves." Chapter 2199. Compensations. Ling Han arrived at the first floor, accompanied by the Empress. Hunyou had once again ran out to play, previously complaining about how Ling Han did not show her enough affection by accompanying her. As for the other women, they were earnestly cultivating inside the Black Tower. They had unlocked the upper limits of their cultivation level, so they naturally could not bear to waste any more time. When they arrived downstairs, they could see 4 people seated in the VIP area. The person who sat in the forefront was an extremely young-looking man. His fingers were slender, smooth and fair, finer than even those of the majority of women. He was presently sipping tea, his left hand holding the teacup, while his right hand was holding the cup's lid. His ring finger and pinky were slightly raised, appearing very effeminate. However, there were 3 men who had overflowing masculinity seated behind him. One had his eyes closed in a doze, his figure so astonishingly fat that even his flesh was spreading out, inciting fear that the chair he was seated on would collapse at any moment. Another was dressed completely in green, only lacking a green cap on his head. The last person finally looked more normal, but there was a sword lying across his legs, while his right hand was holding tightly the sword's hilt, which was also a little weird. Ling Han had cultivated the heaven-deceiving technique, which could not only conceal his own cultivation level and aura, it would also allow him to be extremely sensitive to the auras of others. He only probed slightly, and he discovered that the effeminate man was a Yin soul, while the fat man, man in green, and swordsman were all heaven souls. A Yin soul could actually lord over 3 heaven soul elites. It was either that this sissy had a powerful background, or that he had another identity, which was strong enough to cause even heaven souls to follow his lead. Immediately, a name rose up in Ling Han's mind: Lu Jun. This man was a 3-star alchemist, and in terms of mere status, he was equivalent to an Immortal Palace tier. In that case, it was naturally no strange thing for him to have a few heaven souls under his command. "So you are the new boss of this place?" the effeminate man asked. Ling Han smiled faintly. "So a sissy like you is Lu Jun?" "A sissy." Lu Jun's body trembled slightly, almost spluttering out the tea that he had just sipped. What part of him was like a sissy? Because the extraction of medicinal ingredients was required for alchemy, he was naturally extremely cautious so as not to damage the medicinal ingredients, and had thus cultivated the habit of being gentle in his actions, such as sticking out his pinky finger. This kind of habit had also been brought into his daily life, but was this considered being a sissy? The man in green suddenly stood up and shouted harshly, "How dare you!" Boom! His voice became a sound wave. Pong, 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 it shattered the floor tiles, and rushed out towards Ling Han. Ling Han sent out a casual palm strike. Schwa! The assaulting sound wave was immediately separated into 2, passing by on either side of himself and the Empress. Pong, 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 it destroyed all the floor tiles, tables and chairs behind them. He was completely unconcerned. In any case, all of this would ultimately be placed on Lu Jun's tab, and he would be paying compensation. "So you do have some strength. No wonder you dare to repeatedly refuse my good intentions." Lu Jun humphed, temporarily suppressing the displeasure he felt when Ling Han called him a sissy. "I want this shop, and you can name your price." 100 million starstones, Ling Han answered. Lu Jun immediately looked furious. This broken-down shop's owner actually asked for a price of 100 million starstones? You might as well be committing robbery. Don't misunderstand. Ling Han smiled slightly. This sum is for compensation. You wouldn't be thinking that with you having beaten my people and crashed my shop, the matter would be resolved so simply, right? At this, to say nothing of how Lu Jun was fuming mad, even the fat man had snapped his eyes open, showing a gaze burning with viciousness, while the swordsman had also pulled his sword slightly out of its sheath, blazing with killing intent. Ha! 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 Lu Jun laughed coldly. You are really very brave. I have never seen anyone as outrageously brazen as you. However, with no respect and no sense of propriety, a person like you would also die early. Oh, are you threatening me? Ling Han cracked a smile. It's not a threat. I am just stating facts. Lu Jun humphed. Brother Hu, please make your move. Humph, he is unwilling to listen to kind words, and is so determined to make me use force. How preposterous. As his words fell, the fat man stood up. Once he stood up, the chair he was seated on immediately announced its timely death. A million starstones, Ling Han kindly reminded him, pointing at the broken chair. Then he turned and said to the fat man, Are you going to pay yourself, or will you be placing it on the sissy's tab? You are his subordinate, so I might as well just write it on his tab. It would also be more convenient for me to collect. Tear his mouth apart. Lu Jun roared his fury. He was really extraordinarily furious. He was a 3-star alchemist, and had hopes of advancing to become a 4-star alchemist even. To say nothing of how even immortal palace tier elites would have to be polite towards him. Even ascending origin tiers would give him some face, and now Ling Han was repeatedly calling him a sissy. How could he tolerate that? Arrogant fool, you will be paying a painful price for your ignorance, the fat man declared menacingly. Though he was exceedingly fat, the thing he hated others saying the most were words like plump, fat, and so on. He raised his right hand, and an inky black seal lit up. Immediately, a darkness spread out from underneath his feet, extending out in all directions. This was powerful poison, exuding a rotting smell that would induce nausea. Not only was the smell extraordinarily foul, when the floor tiles and everything else were touched by the darkness, they would all be turned into poisonous liquid, and were also emitting waves of black gas. Haha, in my dark poison territory, poison is everywhere, and with just the slightest skin contact, the spirit would immediately be numbed, and then would slowly rot, turning into a pool of poisonous liquid. The fat man laughed loudly. Once his dark poison territory was unfolded, it meant that he had already won half the battle. Ling Han swept an eye over the surroundings, and couldn't help but shake his head, saying, For million starstones, 8 million starstones, with every table, chair, or floor tile that the poison corroded, he would call out a number for compensation, and the number naturally grew increasingly, soon reaching an astronomical sum. At first, the fat man was extremely confident, but after a few breaths, the grin on his face disappeared, and he looked disbelieving. Why haven't you collapsed yet? This was not logical. Ling Han glared at him and demanded, Are you planning on reneging on your debts? At this, the man in green and the swordsman both stood up, the looks they directed at Ling Han filled with wariness. The aura that Ling Han had at Heaven Soul's level similar to them, but just now, Ling Han had clearly done nothing, but still the poisonous attack of the fat man was completely ineffective. This was something that they could not comprehend, and as a result, it caused a powerful wariness to rise up in them. 240 million starstones. Thanks for the business, Ling Han said smilingly towards Lu Jun. Lu Jun gave Ling Han a profound look, then stood up abruptly, and said, Consider it my error in judgment. As it turned out, the Mere Rain Imperial Pavilion is actually concealing talent as well. This time, I will admit my defeat. Let's go. He turned, planning to leave the shop. However, he had just turned around when he felt a grip tighten on his neck. Then, his body lightened as he was forcibly picked up. A familiar face appeared in front of him. Who else could it be but Ling Han? Lu Jun was both angered and astonished. He actually dared to pick up a 3-star alchemist like him by the neck. This was an outrage. On the other hand, he also felt terror. With the fat man and others by his side, Ling Han still managed to capture him. Could it be that the three of them were just props, There was only one reason, and that was Ling Han was too strong, so strong that the fat man and the others did not even have the time to react. "You, what do you want?" he asked in a trembling voice. Chapter 2200. Asking for intervention. "Are you an idiot?" Ling Han shook his head. "I naturally want compensation." "What? You just plan to stride out of here without paying?" Lu Jun's face was flushed red. He had never been threatened in this manner by anyone before. No, this was a brazen, undisguised robbery. "What, not paying?" Ling Han tossed him a glare. Lu Jun felt extremely sullen. As an alchemist, he had innumerable cultivator friends. They all required alchemical pills, so they were naturally very polite to him, or even respecting him highly. Yet, all of a sudden, someone who didn't play by the rules popped out. His superiority complex was immediately completely refuted. He gritted his teeth and answered, "I'll pay." At this moment, he very much hated the fat man and the others. And they called themselves elites? He had wasted a considerable number of alchemical pills on the three of them, but when they were really needed, they were completely useless. "The money?" Ling Han stretched out a hand. "I haven't brought so many starstones with me," Lu Jun answered, humiliated. "You want credit?" "Sorry, our shop is too small to accept credit." Ling Han patted Lu Jun's shoulder, his expression all smiles. Towards a financial backer, he was naturally very good-tempered. Lu Jun could only search all over himself, and first took out all the starstones contained inside his spatial god tool. This naturally was far from the required sum, so he could only use alchemical pills, medicinal ingredients, and other items as replacement. Ling Han naturally would not mind this. In any case, he was an alchemist as well, so this would save him time. But no matter how, it could not accumulate to a colossal sum as 200 million starstones. Even the fat man, the man in green, and the swordsman emptied all their belongings, and just barely gathered a sum of 150 million starstones. Ling Han waved a hand and said, "I have always been easy to deal with, so forget the remaining sum." Easy to deal with. Lu Jun and the others were almost passing out in fury. Hadn't they just broken some furniture and injured a few people? And they were actually forced to pay a compensation of 200 million starstones. Who else could be as vicious as you? Aren't you guys feeling very grateful? Ling Han asked smilingly, yet his eyes were incredibly dangerous. Grateful. Extremely grateful. Lu Jun and the others nodded quickly. Discretion was the better part of valor. At present, they could not afford to anger Ling Han. Go on then. Ling Han very generously allowed the four of them to leave. After Lu Jun and his group stepped out of the shop, they hurriedly burst into a run and fled. They returned to Saintly Origin Academy. Normally, the man in green and the others would not be qualified to enter into Saintly Origin Academy. Aside from experts in a particular field, cultivators would have to be at least Emperor tiers to qualify for enrollment into Saintly Origin Academy. The goal of the academy was to nurture first heaven celestial kings at minimum, and there was basically no possibility that king tiers could advance to this level. However, every disciple of the Saintly Origin Academy was allowed to have their own followers, establishing their own forces. Perhaps those mighty figures had also considered that when war broke out with the force of darkness in the future, every student that advanced into Celestial King tier could have their own troops, increasing their power. Hence, the man in green and others were able to follow Lu Jun into Saintly Origin Academy merely. This fact was enough to attract countless cultivators. At present, who did not want to enter into Saintly Origin Academy? Trash. Trash. You all are trash. The moment Lu Jun returned to his accommodations, he threw a tantrum. The Saintly Origin Academy had been co-founded by 22 Ninth Heaven Celestial Kings, and was naturally very extraordinary. Not only was it exceptionally huge, a great many mountains of the celestial realm had even been moved here, with abundant spiritual chi, and they even had unique elemental alignments. There were metal-aligned mountains, and if one cultivated on this mountain, it would be greatly beneficial for those who cultivated the regulations of metal. Similarly, there were also water-aligned mountains covered with ice and snow, entwined with water dragons, as well as lightning-aligned mountains, where blazing white lightning flashed endlessly. An alchemist like Lu Jun naturally lived on a herb mountain. The whole mountain was planted with various medicinal ingredients, And there were even some celestial medicines. But the celestial medicines that could be planted were basically of the 5 elements. Even a celestial king could not forcibly bring those like space flowers and plant them here. Lu Jun had an abode here, abundant with spiritual qi. It was beneficial for cultivation as well as concocting alchemical pills. The man in green and the others all lowered their heads, making no sound. What could they say? They had indeed been utterly useless. In fact, because they had damaged the furniture, they had increased Lu Jun's debts. But they were also feeling very wronged. Initially, their cultivation level as heaven souls was already very strong, and even the top-grade prodigies in the academy had just broken through to the immortal palace tier. So wasn't heaven soul strong enough? Yet the reality was really so bloody and harsh that the 3 of them had no way to excuse themselves. After Lu Jun threw a tantrum, he slowly calmed down. I must exact this revenge, he declared. That was natural. To say nothing else, merely the fact that Ling Han had swindled him out of 150 million starstones could not be dismissed just like that. This was all the wealth that he had saved up with much difficulty over tens of millions of years, and just the thought of it caused his heart to ache to the point of throwing up blood. This guy should be a heaven soul emperor tier, he deduced. Otherwise, there was no way he could have easily captured him despite the protection of the man in green and the others. The Saintly Origin Academy has ruled that only emperor tiers would be qualified to join the selections, yet he has opened a pharmacy here, which means that he had not passed the selections. Otherwise, there would be no way that I would not know of such a character. Since that's the case, I will ask a heaven soul monarch tier to interfere, and he would definitely be easily suppressed. Just in time, Gu Yushu has just asked me to concoct a secret construct pill for him. If I ask him to interfere on my behalf, he will definitely oblige. All right, I will ask for his intervention. Though they said they would be shopping, Hunyo was the first to run back alone. Too boring. She complained the moment she ran in the doors, talking about how the food here was not delicious at all. Just when she was energetically complaining, she heard a cold laugh. Lu Jun had come back. Han Lin, he said menacingly. After experiencing a loss, he had naturally investigated Ling Han's identity. You have scammed me out of so much, and not only do I want you to pay me back in full, it has to be doubled. Ling Han's ears were just about to explode from Hunyo's tortuous rants when he saw Lu Jun suddenly appear. Involuntarily, he was overjoyed. This was a kind man that had come to rescue him from his suffering. He shook his head at Hunyo, expressing to her that it was time for serious matters now. Hunyo was already very displeased in the first place. Immediately, she turned her head and glared harshly at Lu Jun. It was true that Lu Jun was an alchemy prodigy, but in cultivation, he did not have much exceptional natural talent. His Dao heart naturally wasn't very strong. With such a glare from Hunyo, he immediately stumbled backwards, almost collapsing on the ground. He hadn't collapsed, not because he had overcome the chills in his heart, but because someone behind him had stretched out a hand, placing it on his back, and preventing him from embarrassing himself. This was a very handsome and dashing young man dressed in white robes. His hair was thick and black as ink, each strand exuding a divine light, as if he was a divine being. However, while he was handsome and dashing indeed, his expression was filled with arrogance. He glanced at Ling Han and declared, "Return all the wealth that you have tricked him for, and double that as compensation. Then, I will break your arm, and this matter will be considered resolved. Breaking your arm is because you have forced me to act." He pointed at his own chest. "When I, Gu Yushu, make a move, there has never been an occasion when no blood is spilled." Arrogant, he was really very arrogant. Involuntarily, Ling Han's interest was piqued. He turned to Lu Jun and asked, "Where did you find this idiot? He's really very funny." Chapter 2201. Compensation Again. "Are you seeking death?" Lu Jun had not answered, but Gu Yushu was already humping coldly. His eyes were focused directly on Ling Han, exuding a menacing chill. Only then did Lu Jun say, "Do you know who he is? Brother Gu is an A-grade student of the Saintly Origin Academy, a great monarch tier. Though he is a heaven soul like you, his strength overwhelms the strength of an emperor tier like you by who knows how many times over." Ling Han couldn't help but laugh. How do you know that I am an emperor tier? What if I, too, am a monarch tier? What a joke! Gu Yushu scoffed. Monarch tiers will definitely be qualified to enroll in the academy, and only emperor tiers will be qualified to join the selections. It must be that you have not passed the selections, and are willing to leave due to your reluctance. That's why you have stayed until now. As a cultivator to actually make a living from selling alchemical pills, how humiliating. Ling Han laughed loudly. If you're so awesome, don't ingest any alchemical pills yourself then. Yet Gu Yushu couldn't even be bothered to pay any regard to him. In his eyes, alchemists were only tools that served cultivators. If it were not for the fact that he required a great amount of secret construct pills to break through to the Immortal Palace tier, even Lu Jun would be below his notice. He had a low opinion of chefs, but how could it be that he would not eat? And now, not only will I be crippling one of your arms, I will also be slapping that stinky mouth of yours into pieces, Gu Yushu declared balefully. Lu Jun immediately nodded in quick succession. He also hated Ling Han's mouth very much. The two of you get lost. Hu Niu bared her teeth, looking vicious. When Lu Jun and Gu Yushu's eyes swept over, they both looked stunned. It wasn't that they had not spotted Hu Niu previously. It was just that their entire focus was on Ling Han. It was just a passing glance, and they had not looked closely at her. But it was a different story now. With Hu Niu interrupting like this, they immediately saw her clearly. This girl was very beautiful, very pure, and like a sparkling stream, giving comfort to anyone who saw her. Step aside, Gu Yushu exclaimed. However, though his voice carried a command, his tone wasn't very severe. Hu Niu placed her hands on her hips and declared, "Despicable, Niu was already very angry today, and you people actually dare to anger Niu further. Humph, you guys are finished. Niu will *s rape you." Hearing these words, even Ling Han broke out in a cold sweat. He had set a wrong example only once, and the little girl had been completely corrupted. Gu Yushu's expression darkened, showing a hint of displeasure. Hu Niu had also cultivated the heaven-deceiving technique, so there were some slight changes to her appearance and bearing. Though she was still very beautiful, just like the Empress, she was considerably less beautiful than the fine exquisite beauty she had been previously. Thus, though Gu Yushu admired Hu Niu's beauty, it had not reached the point of complete captivation. "Miss, you are making a miss." Pang! He had not even said all his words when a fair, delicate tiny fist was already crashing towards him. Though this fist was incredibly graceful, Gu Yushu immediately broke out in a cold sweat. He felt that if this fist actually landed on him, he would definitely suffer a serious injury. In this instant, he did not have the time to consider how Hu Niu could be so strong, and hurriedly raised his arms, forming a cross in front of him. The punch landed, and a shield of light immediately took form in front of him. There was the azure dragon howling, the white tiger roaring, the vermilion bird spreading its wings, and the black tortoise holding up the heavens. Hu Niu's fist stopped forcibly, but the little girl did not withdraw her fist. Instead, she humphed, and boom, a layer of bright flames immediately wrapped around her tiny fist. Source power of heaven and earth, purple spirit flames. Instantly, cracks appeared in the shield of light in front of Gu Yushu. Crack, 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 the cracks became larger and larger, and the shield finally crumbled resoundingly. Hu Niu's punch shot straight in, but Gu Yushu had also gained a chance to catch his breath back. With a tap of his foot, he hurriedly retreated. He was involuntarily astonished. What he had used now was the 4 divisions technique, which had been created by an 8th heaven celestial king. He had also mastered the cultivation technique completely, but because of his cultivation level, he was unable to execute its greatest might yet. However, this should not be something that could be broken by an elite of the same level, either, especially when it had just sustained a single punch. That fire was too terrifying. Ah! He suddenly grabbed his head, feeling a frightening intent barraging his spirit. Instantly, he was bleeding from all his orifices, making for a tragic sight. The purple spirit flames did not just have a terrifying physical attack, but also targeted one's spirit. How could Gu Yushu have possibly predicted that Hu Niu possessed a source power of heaven and earth? That was something that was very difficult for even celestial kings to obtain. Pang! Hu Niu's battle awareness was incredibly strong. She had long since approached, and waved her fists repeatedly. Pang, 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 she thrashed Gu Yushu harshly. Initially, even if Gu Yushu was inferior to Ling Han, it would not go as far as this, but who asked that he was careless? For those that had reached a pinnacle like theirs, the slightest misstep would mean losing the whole battle. Gu Yushu could only parry repeatedly, but Hu Niu's stamina was extremely frightening. Though she was still inferior to Ling Han, she had long since reached the immortal palace tier in terms of stamina, and because of this, her frequency and speed of attack far surpassed Gu Yushu's. Pang, pang, pang. Hu Niu's fists showered like rain, and Gu Yushu could only retreat continuously. As he retreated, he would naturally crash into tables, chairs, the wall, and so on. Undoubtedly, whatever he crashed into would immediately crumble. Meanwhile, Ling Han was smilingly counting on the sidelines. 1,000,000 starstones, 2,000,000 starstones, with every number he spoke, he would glance at Lu Jun, and the latter couldn't help but want to stomp in fury. It was not him that had caused the destruction, so what did it have to do with him? Moreover, there were a great many things that had been broken by Hu Niu, so why were they placed on his tab as well? After complaining internally, Lu Jun's heart was also throbbing madly. It was extremely possible that Gu Yushu was no match for that beauty. How was this possible? Gu Yushu was a grand monarch tier, and Hu Niu was not an immortal palace tier either, so how could Gu Yushu be beaten to the point that he could not even fight back at all? Hiss, this meant that Hu Niu was also a monarch tier herself. But why would a monarch tier not have enrolled into Saintly Origin Academy? 30 years had already passed. Would Gu Yushu lose? This thought came to being in his mind. At first, he did not have the slightest doubt about Gu Yushu's strength, and those that could suppress Gu Yushu. There was practically no one in the Heaven Soul. At most, they could only be his equal. Yet now, Lu Jun was filled with worry. There was worry for Gu Yushu, and worry for his own purse as well. Previously, Ling Han had glanced at him with every number he called out. Clearly, he was going to be treated as the spendthrift fool again. Gu Yushu, you must counter bravely. Too bad. Things turned out contrary to his wishes. Gu Yushu had not found a point where he could counter, but was instead being suppressed by Hu Niu harder and harder. Not only did Hu Niu have astonishing natural talent in cultivation, her battle awareness was also extraordinary. In a situation where the battle prowess of both sides was more or less equal, as long as she could find the chance, there was practically no possibility for even Ling Han to turn the tables around. Then how would Gu Yushu accomplish that? Because Hu Niu had already come close enough to him, he did not even have the time to summon a treasure like a pseudo-celestial tool or decree. He could only deal endlessly with Hu Niu's fists that rained down like a heavy shower. Otherwise, if he was just hit once, even if he did manage to take out a decree or pseudo-celestial tool, he might be completely knocked out too. He could only defend his vital areas. Because his speed of attack was completely inferior to Hu Niu's, the parts like his arms, legs, and feet could only be given up. Even if he was beaten, there was nothing he could do. As they fought, he continued to retreat. Because Hu Niu was suppressing him completely, he could not turn the tables around with his own power. What else could he do but retreat? Pang, pang, pang. With his retreat, he very quickly created a large hole in the wall of the pharmacy. This would be 20,000,000 star stones, Ling Han said to Lu Jun. What did that have to do with him? Lu Jun wanted to cry, but had no tears. He really didn't have any more money. Chapter 2202. Collecting on Behalf. Pang, Gu Yushu was still retreating, and he destroyed another wall. That's another 20 million. Ling Han totaled the compensation. Lu Jun could no longer hold back. He jumped up and exclaimed, "That isn't even your shop." Right, Gu Yushu had retreated out of the pharmacy. The wall he had crashed through belonged to another shop, and the latter did not have the slightest relation with Rain Imperial Pavilion. Ling Han glared at him. "You are such a busybody. Can't it be that I am collecting on the owner's behalf?" Collecting on behalf. Lu Jun shuddered. He looked behind Gu Yushu, and it was densely covered with buildings. As he retreated, he continued his path of destruction. If Ling Han was collecting on their behalf as well, Then would Lu Jun be able to pay for the compensations even if he sold himself into service for the rest of his life? Gu Yushu, you should rise up and counter, I beg you. Unfortunately, the heavens did not heed his plea, and neither did Gu Yushu. He was still destroying one wall after another loudly, and Ling Han called out numbers that would make one's heart race in quick succession. Lu Jun felt like he was about to pass out. Though he had seen the world, when he thought of the debts that he might have to bear, his face turned ashen. However, his worries soon ended. It was not that Gu Yushu had managed to rise up and counter, finally getting a chance at victory, but rather that he had finally been defeated by Hu Niu, and had been pressed onto the ground while he was being beaten harshly. Then, it was natural that there was no way that he could destroy any more walls, chairs or anything else. 980 million starstones. Thanks for the business. Ling Han looked at Lu Jun, smiling widely. Lu Jun felt his vision darken. He had really passed out. Firstly, it was due to anxiety, and secondly, because of anger. How could anyone do that? They had just destroyed a few walls, a few tables and chairs, and they had to pay so much. S rape. S rape. Hu Niu returned energetically, holding Gu Yushu up by the scruff of his neck. When she arrived at the doors of the pharmacy, she gave a careless toss, and Gu Yushu was sprawled out on the ground, and very coincidentally, his behind was raised high. The little girl took out a metal rod, her expression filled with anticipation. Stop, stop, stop. Ling Han hurriedly stretched out his hand to stop her. It was fine to play around, or use it as a threat, but you couldn't actually do it. No, Niu wants to play. Hu Niu pouted. It's not fun, Ling Han persuaded. It's fun. Hu Niu acted spoiled. Ling Han directly stuffed a chicken drumstick into Hu Niu's mouth. Be good and eat some meat. Hu Niu was still mumbling, very much wanting to spit out this drumstick to express her displeasure, but this chicken drumstick was unexpectedly especially delicious, and she could not bring herself to spit it out. She could only chew on it viciously as if she was venting her displeasure. As she ate, she looked regretfully at Gu Yushu's behind. She had not forgotten her idea of an S rape at all. Even if he was heavily injured and slightly out of his wits, Gu Yushu suddenly felt a chill rise up in his heart. Cultivators had an instinctive feeling about danger, especially when it was a monarch tier like him. Ling Han grabbed both Gu Yushu and Lu Jun, and stuffed them into chairs. With a tremor of origin power, the both of them slowly came back to consciousness. The first thing they saw was naturally Ling Han's widely smiling face. His expression was completely innocent and harmless, yet Lu Jun was incredibly clear just how vicious the heart that lay behind this face could be. Then they saw Hu Niu, who was chewing on a chicken drumstick, looking like she was enjoying herself one moment, and then glaring at them ferociously the next, causing chills to rise up in both their hearts. They could tell now that this girl wasn't the type to be reasoned with. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "Come, let us discuss the matter of compensation." "I have no more money." Lu Jun was very frank. "You know that I am not lying." Previously, he had already emptied all his savings. Ling Han glanced at Gu Yushu again. "I don't care which of you is paying, as long as the bill is completely cleared." "How much do you want?" "I'll pay," Gu Yushu said proudly, and tossed a disdainful look at Lu Jun. And he called himself an alchemist? He couldn't even pay compensation for a few broken walls and chairs. Lu Jun shook his head internally, thinking, "Brother, you are going to cry later." This guy would not blink before ripping someone off. Very straightforward. Ling Han clapped a hand on Gu Yushu's shoulder. "I like the straightforward type like you." A mild amount of self-satisfaction actually rose up in Gu Yushu, but he immediately chased it away. "All right then. 980 million starstones, and since you are so straightforward, I'll make it a whole sum for you, so it will be 1 billion starstones," Ling Han said. Gu Yushu instantly gaped, looking at Ling Han in disbelief. His only thought was this person must have either gone mad, or his brain must have been burnt to actually dare ask for such an exorbitant sum. Wasn't it just a few chairs and walls? 1 starstone was completely enough. Ling Han was displeased now, and demanded, "What is the meaning of that look and expression? You don't want to pay compensation? And you were just patting your chest so confidently, saying that you were very straightforward, but why have you become petty now?" Gu Yushu shivered, and then said, but it can't be as exaggerated as 1 billion. Furthermore, when others made it a whole sum, they reduced the amount, but in your case, you were increasing the price. Are you saying that I am screwing you over? Ling Han looked towards Lu Jun. Come, you say it. Aren't I always so honest and sincere, fair and just to the point of public indignation? Lu Jun was in no mood to complain about Ling Han's improper use of words. Being looked at by Ling Han with such a cheery, but actually filled with killing intent, stare, how could he possibly dare to say anything that was detrimental to Ling Han? Young Master Han is the most just, he hurriedly declared. You see. Ling Han clapped his hands, as expected, written all over his face. Gu Yushu really wanted to kick Lu Jun to the ground. What were you cowering for? This place was Li Shui City, and they were also disciples of Saintly Origin Academy. How could Ling Han dare to do anything to them? Though it was not that all 22 Ninth Heaven Celestial Kings were based here, as long as 1 or 2 of them were present, their divine sense could reach all corners, so how could they possibly sit by and watch them get killed? Of course, a 9th Heaven Celestial King couldn't possibly bother with trifle matters like this, either. This was also why Ling Han dared to publicly blackmail them like this. Who asked them to trifle with him first? No matter how much he ripped them off, he was in the right. It's too much, Gu Yushu said, lowering his head. Though Ling Han was really too vicious, he actually could not take out so much money, which was also slightly embarrassing for him. Ah, you're so poor? Ling Han looked like he was mourning for his misfortune. And you call yourself a monarch tier? Gu Yushu felt very wronged. If the resources that were poured into him were traded for starstones, then to say nothing of 1 billion, it was even more than 10 billion. But how could the money spent on him be compared to the money he actually had? Even for a monarch tier like himself, it was already very impressive if he had 100 million starstones, and 1 billion was really too much. Give me some time, and I'll definitely collect the amount. He forced out the answer through gritted teeth, unable to bear such humiliation. He would rather first throw the 1 billion starstones onto Ling Han, then ask someone to help, and deal with Ling Han, taking the starstones back. How can that be allowed? What if you renege on your debt? Ling Han shook his head. I definitely won't, Gu Yushu guaranteed again. Stop spouting nonsense, and take out all your money first. Ling Han took out a steel rod. If you continue to chatter needlessly, I will *S rape both of you first. Hunyo immediately pouted. And he said that *S rape wasn't fun. It was clear that he himself wanted to play, but did not allow her to. Both Lu Jun's and Gu Yushu's face were pale with fear. If they were to be publicly *S raped, how would they be able to face others in the future? I'll pay. I'll pay. Both of them hurriedly called out. Chapter 2203. Struck down with a single punch. How were they supposed to pay compensations without money? Simple, sign a slavery contract. Lu Jun would have to concoct alchemical pills for Ling Han without charge for 10,000 years. Of course, this was in real time. However, the ingredients for pill concoction would naturally be supplied by Ling Han. Otherwise, Lu Jun would really be crying himself to death. And Gu Yushu would have to honor Ling Han as his boss, and the time was also 10,000 years. In that time, he would have to beat up anyone Ling Han commanded him to, with absolutely no questions asked. After the slavery contract was signed, Ling Han finally allowed Lu Jun and Gu Yushu to leave. Now what do we do? When they returned to the proximity of the academy, Lu Jun asked this question with a crestfallen expression. Now, he was really extremely regretful. He had just wanted to find a shop with an acceptable location, and in the end, not only had he lost an astronomical amount of wealth, he had even sold himself into the deal, forced to concoct alchemical pills for 10,000 years without charge. Meanwhile, Gu Yushu's hands were balled into fists, his face pale and ashen. He thought for a moment, and then said, that man is just relying on women. His own strength would not be all that powerful. And that woman is indeed strong. I am not. I was too careless. Once I find a few more people, it will not be difficult to suppress her. Lu Jun couldn't help but disagree inwardly. You were clearly no match for her, all right? And you claim you were being careless? However, he basically agreed with Gu Yushu's opinion. Though Hunyo was very strong, As long as several Heaven Soul Monarch tears worked together, she could still be easily suppressed. I can get a few people, Gu Yushu continued, but just to be safe, we had best get a few more, and that will be up to Yule. Lu Jun could only nod in response. He, too, had no wish to concoct alchemical pills for Ling Han for 10,000 years for free if that was in the time cultivation chamber. That wouldn't be 10,000 years, but rather 100,000 years, or even 1,000,000 years. If he knew that Ling Han's Black Tower could accelerate time by 100,000 times, he would probably cry himself to death. Wasn't it just concocting a few more secret construct pills? He was a 3-star alchemist, and would soon be advancing into the ranks of 4-star alchemists. The secret construct pill was not a very difficult task for him. The two of them went their separate ways, each going to get help. Half a day later they met up again, and this time it naturally was not just the two of them anymore, but rather a total of 11 people. Among them, Gu Yushu had invited 5 people, while Lu Jun had gotten 4. Aside from Lu Jun, the other 10 people were all Heaven Soul Monarch tears. Why would there be so many Heaven Soul Monarch tears? Very simple. Firstly, this was Saintly Origin Academy, which had practically gathered all the Monarch tears in the entire celestial realm. Secondly, it was extremely hard to break through to the Immortal Palace tier. Thus, even Monarch tears would be stuck on this stage, and have no means of easily advancing to the next level. Brother Gu, are we going to hunt a ferocious Immortal Palace tier beast? A Monarch tier asked, laughing. There were a total of 10 Heaven Soul Monarch tiers, and that was indeed enough to be qualified to battle a first secret elite. Yet Gu Yushu answered darkly, "Don't be careless. That woman may only be a Heaven Soul Monarch tier as well, but her battle prowess is stronger than any ordinary Monarch tiers. Otherwise, I would not have needed to ask for your help." Hee hee. The Monarch tiers all laughed, and did not refute his words, yet they all showed arrogant expressions. You couldn't defeat her, because you were too weak. What was a Monarch tier? A Monarch tier could still be invincible against an opponent that was superior by 2 minor levels. If you couldn't be invincible, why call yourself a Monarch tier? Gu Yushu did not offer further explanations. In any case, they would know once they actually fought her. And what he wanted even more was to snatch his slavery contract back from Ling Han's hands. Otherwise, this would be his lifelong shame, and others would be laughing to death at him. The 11 people immediately charged towards the Rain Imperial Pavilion, and very soon arrived at their destination. Han Lin, come out! Gu Yushu shouted loudly. Is there any lackey like you? Ling Han stuck out a head from a window of the 2nd floor. Though it had only been a day, with the means at the hand of people of the celestial realm, it was naturally no big deal for them to rebuild a structure. Lackey? The other Monarch tiers heard this, and all looked at Gu Yushu strangely. They were only aware that Gu Yushu had taken some losses, but what was the meaning of the word lackey? Ignore him. You guys only have to suppress that woman. As for that man, leave him to me. Gu Yushu was in a bit of fury due to humiliation. Sure. The other 9 Monarch tiers all nodded. Since they had all agreed to accept the benefits that Gu Yushu and Lu Jun had promised, they naturally were duty-bound to work for them. They stood, arms crossed behind their backs. Since that woman did not come out, there was no significance or need for them to move. Yet Gu Yushu gave a harsh cry, and he leaped towards the window on the 2nd floor. Xiao, a figure darted out, approaching Gu Yushu. Ha! Gu Yushu couldn't help but feel stunned. Though the person who had moved was a woman, it was not Hunyeo, and this woman's battle prowess was also incredibly astonishing. The moment she moved, he felt a powerful pressure in no way inferior to that of Hunyeo, who had exchanged blows with him before. Pang! With just one strike, Gu Yushu was struck down. Half his body had sunk into the dirt, but he fortunately had not been injured severely. At this, the other 9 Monarch tiers looked solemn. Though the person who had moved had had a geographical advantage, the fact that she had managed to strike down Gu Yushu with a single punch meant that she was clearly enjoying an absolute upper hand in terms of strength. Gu Yushu had not exaggerated. This woman indeed could not be underestimated. Who are you? But once Gu Yushu spoke out, everyone almost passed out. How could you not recognize her? Hold on, could it be that this was not the woman who had defeated Gu Yushu? This woman was dressed in sunny yellow robes and very beautiful, but her bearing was incredibly majestic and noble, as if she was a supreme empress, such that others wanted to kneel down at her feet in worship. Of course it was the empress. She is ugly. Hunyeo appeared in succession, and stood with the empress, one on either side. The empress disdained arguing with Hunyeo, and was incredibly aloof and refined. Gu Yushu faltered a little, and then said, "Everyone, I will leave these two women to you." "No big deal." The 9 great monarch tiers all nodded. Though they admitted that the empress was strong, and similarly did not dare treat Hunyeo carelessly, since she was cut from the same cloth, judging from the way the two women moved, they were not yet heaven-defyingly strong. With 9 monarch tiers working together, suppressing the two women would be a small matter. In fact, capturing them was not impossible, either. Gu Yushu nodded and turned to look once again at the second floor, exclaiming, "Han Lin, what else do you have up your sleeve now?" As his words fell, he leaped once more towards the second floor, and this time, neither Hunyeo nor the empress moved to stop him. Pang! A gigantic fist descended from the skies, bearing an endless air of dominance. Then, Gu Yushu was seen to have no ability to defend himself, and was struck down forcibly by this punch, being embedded heavily into the ground. Everyone couldn't help but pale, feeling a powerful chill rise up from the depths of their hearts. Whichever of them this punch fell on, there would be completely no way for them to defend. They could only be crushed, just like Gu Yushu. But what was more horrifying was the person who had launched the punch was clearly only a heaven soul. The dividing soul tier and immortal palace tier had completely different auras, and even a severing mundane tier would be able to distinguish on the basis that the party in question had made a move. How was this possible? They were both heaven souls, and Gu Yushu was a monarch tier at that, and he actually could not block a single punch from the other. They all looked towards the person who had launched the punch, and saw Ling Han casually withdrawing his fist, looking completely unconcerned. "I just happen to be short of a few lackeys. Since you guys have delivered yourselves to my doorstep, if I don't take you guys in, won't it be letting down your kind intentions?" Ling Han chuckled. As his eyes swept over the 9 monarch tiers below, that smile was eerily chilling. The 9 great monarch tiers exchanged looks, and then simultaneously turned in the opposite direction and fled. Chapter 2204. Slavery Contract. This was the first time for the 9 great monarch tiers to flee before the battle even started. But they still fled very decisively, without the slightest bit of hesitation. You had to be joking. He had been able to pummel Gu Yushu with a single punch. What kind of concept was that? Ling Han had to be the same type of super freak as Ji Wuming and Shi Chanzi. To say nothing of the fact that there were only 9 of them, even if 90 of them joined forces, they would only be suppressed, unless they could advance into the immortal palace tier. At present, they were all too strongly suppressed. Ling Han chuckled, and spread his fingers. Instantly, streaks of sword light shot out, enveloping the area within the nearest 50 kilometers, looking like they were heavenly pillars. All 9 great monarch tiers stopped, not daring to cross over a single step. They had a feeling that if they were to forcibly barge past the heavenly pillars, they would be suffering a heavy blow, and as a result, they would be definitely crushed into dust. Too frightening. Such an elite was too terrifying. He was definitely on par with immortal palace tiers, and they did not dare to show the slightest bit of temper at all. Though monarch tiers were proud, they could also accept facts far sooner than the ordinary man. Very quickly, they turned around, and headed back to the Rain Imperial Pavilion. "Sir, what do you want to do?" a monarch tier asked. Ling Han cracked a smile and said, "Could it be that you have not heard what I said? Fine then, I will repeat it once more. I am short of a few lackeys, and judge that you guys are quite suitable, so have decided to give you a chance." The 9 great monarch tiers all looked furious. They were all monarch tiers, and were people that were destined to eventually become celestial kings. How could they become someone else's lackeys? "Sir, we have only been tricked, and we have not made a move, either. There is no need for you to be imperious, right?" a monarch tier said. This was the Saintly Origin Academy. Who dared to mess around? Ling Han chuckled. "If it was not for the fact that I am strong enough, would you guys still be saying these words? Since you are already here, it means that you have all intended to deal with me, and have put that intent into action. I cannot tolerate that. Sir, death is better than being insulted. Do you want to force us into a life and death struggle? Another monarch tear threatened. Whoosh! Ling Han moved, his palm turning into a small mountain that descended down onto that monarch tear. Without a doubt. So what if he was a monarch tear? In the face of battle prowess that was comparable to peak stage 4th secret, he was only a little rabbit that was completely incapable of resistance. Boom! That person was instantly suppressed, sprawling out on the ground. Ling Han looked towards the rest and asked smilingly, anyone else defiant? The remaining 8 monarch tears all looked at one another. They were furious, but did not dare to say anything, feeling extremely sullen. Usually, it would be they that would be looking down on the rest of the common people, but now all of them were standing on the ground, looking upwards at a majestic supreme monarch tier, which made them feel very displeased. Xiao Shu, come, have those companions of yours come and sign a slavery contract as well. It's the same as yours, all 10,000 years. Ling Han beckoned Gu Yushu over, and the latter finally climbed to his feet. This was naturally because Ling Han had been merciful. Otherwise, wouldn't it be child's play for an immortal palace tier to kill a heaven soul? However, in this Lishui city, the divine sense of the celestial kings was everywhere, and it was equivalent to committing murder right in front of a celestial king. This was also an impossible matter. Hence, Ling Han had never planned to kill anyone. He was just going to scam them out of their money, and take in some lackeys. Gu Yushu's expression was extremely ugly. He had initially brought people here to get vengeance for himself, but what was the result? Still, what could he do even if he was defiant? No celestial king had spoken up even until now, clearly signifying that the celestial kings couldn't even be bothered to interfere in the minor quarrels of juniors like them. Then, as long as Ling Han did not kill them or cripple their cultivation, the celestial kings would probably overlook the matter entirely, and allow it to proceed as it would. Gu Yushu took out a few pieces of beast hide. This was the hide of immortal beasts. Not only was it incredibly sturdy, it could be kept for countless years, which made it very suitable for bearing contracts. Compelled by Ling Han's intimidation, the 9 great monarch tiers could only sign their respective slavery contracts. If they did not sign, that would definitely not be allowed. Sign then. In any case, as long as they could take back their slavery contracts, it would be no loss to them, either. Ling Han was very satisfied, and stowed all 9 slavery contracts away. If you're dissatisfied, go ahead and find people to challenge me. I do not mind gathering a few more lackeys. The 10 great monarch tiers all wanted to die from their humiliation. They all turned around and ran. As for how the others would be reproaching Gu Yushu, this was not within Ling Han's range of consideration. Meanwhile, Lu Jun had not left. Ling Han had grabbed him to concoct some alchemical pills. For the moment, there should not be anyone else that would come to make trouble for Ling Han. He renovated the pharmacy again, and then grabbed Lu Jun into the Black Tower, the two of them concocting alchemical pills together. To open a pharmacy, there naturally should be alchemical pills, especially high-grade alchemical pills. When Lu Jun entered the Black Tower, he had been knocked out first. When he opened his eyes again, he realized that he was already inside the Black Tower, and he couldn't even think much about the matter before Ling Han shot him a kick. Then, he obediently began to concoct alchemical pills. Over 1,000 years had passed inside the Black Tower, and Ling Han had also gained enough alchemical pills in his possession. Added with those concocted by Lu Jun, Ling Han felt that it would be enough for the pharmacy to be in practice for a while. He exited the Black Tower. As for Lu Jun, he continued to concoct alchemical pills inside the Black Tower. He did not know about the flow of time inside the Black Tower, and thought that it was only time acceleration effects of 100 times at most. At worst, he only had to work hard for 1,000,000 years, and he would be able to regain his freedom. Ling Han, when are we going to the Saintly Origin Academy? Hun Yo asked delicately. She had been learning how to charm men from bewitching Maiden Row the last few days, so the way she spoke was also strange. Ling Han laughed and said, "Nyo, you're not suited for this style, so it's best not to learn it." "Why?" Hun Yo still asked sweetly, and even flashed a coquettish glance at Ling Han. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh even louder, splitting his sides in uproaring laughter. "Not fun." Hun Yo pouted her tiny mouth. Which Row lied. She said that it would definitely make you completely besotted, but in the end, you just keep laughing. Humph. Just what are you laughing at? What's so funny? Ling Han patted Hunyo's cheek. Little girl, I already told you. You don't belong to this style. Hunyo was displeased. Why was she unable to seduce Ling Han? Ling Han thought for a moment and said, when second brother comes out of seclusion, we will then head to Saintly Origin Academy. Okay. Hunyo nodded. They waited patiently, and Ling Han continued to concoct alchemical pills. He would never be complaining about having too many alchemical pills. After a year had passed in real time, the Rain Emperor finally came out of seclusion. He had formed 9 divided souls, and his strength had attained a breakthrough, practically having no rival at the Heaven Soul. Since the Rain Emperor had broken through, Ling Han and the others thus set out toward Saintly Origin Academy immediately. Especially in the case of Ling Han and the Rain Emperor, they were both excited to meet the true top-tier prodigies, such as Ji Wuming and Shi Chanzich. They weren't too far off from Saintly Origin Academy. In about a few minutes, they already arrived outside the academy. If it hadn't been that close, Lu Jun would not have set his eye on the Rain Imperial Pavilion before. It was precisely because that town was the nearest to the academy, so the customer flow would naturally be the greatest as well. The Saintly Origin Academy was very big and extremely grand. From the outside, multiple great mountains pierced the clouds, each having their own distinctive traits. There was a flame mountain covered with fiercely blazing flames, a water mountain entwined with water dragons and covered in ice and snow, a lightning mountain where lightning crisscrossed. There were a total of 7 such great mountains, representing the 5 elements, lightning element, and poison element, respectively. However, there were no mountains that represented time, space, or slaughter, because even celestial kings could not relocate such mountain ranges. No such place even existed in this world. How were they supposed to go in? Chapter 2205. In front of the Academy Gates. The Saintly Origin Academy had been co-founded by 22 Ninth Heaven Celestial Kings, so its status was naturally astonishingly high, even more amazing than the greatest sects in the world. You wanted to enter into the gates of the Academy? It was difficult. Who did not want to enroll into the Saintly Origin Academy? But the threshold for enrollment was too high. Ling Han, the Rain Emperor, Hunyo, and the Empress stood side by side, standing at the gates of the Academy. They were just 4 people, yet seemed like 4 great rulers, capable of causing an endless stir in the atmosphere. However, Hunyo was too unreliable. She had already taken out a chicken drumstick to chew on, and the image was immediately destroyed without leaving anything behind, completely becoming a comical scene. Who are these 4 idiots? Do they think that just standing at the Academy gates, they can consider themselves disciples of the Academy? Haha, where did these 4 jokers come from? Students came in and out, and when they saw Ling Han and his group, they immediately erupted into discussions, feeling that these 4 people were really too funny. A man approached, asking Hunyo and the Empress, "Beauties, become my followers, and I will take the 2 of you in, how about it?" "Scram or Nyo will beat you to burst." As Hunyo chewed on her chicken drumstick, she issued a threat to the man. "Yo, our popular lover boy has been rebuffed." Another man walked over. This was a man dressed in a green shirt, having a lanky build, his aura majestic. The first man turned, glanced at the man in the green shirt, frowned, and said, "Jia Shi, there is no need for your interference." "Have I spoken wrongly, Cheng Liang?" The man in the green shirt, Jia Shi, stated calmly. The first man's name was Cheng Liang, and he was a well-known playboy. Furthermore, he did indeed have his ways with women. A great many women whose cultivation levels were higher and stronger than his had all willingly become his lovers. When he spotted the Empress and Hunyo, he had gained some intentions, and that was why he had immediately approached. Being rejected by Hunyo was naturally within his expectations as well. No matter how charismatic he was, he had not reached the point that others would be falling in love with him at first sight. However, he would first strike up a conversation, get familiar, and next he would shamelessly pursue them, slowly unfolding his charisma little by little, completely winning the hearts of these 2 beauties. As for Jia Shi, he too was a playboy. That was why he knew that the former would be undermining his plans when he emerged, and his goal would also be these 2 exquisite beauties. Xueqi, are you planning to become my enemy? He asked menacingly. Xueqi chuckled coldly. He was indeed no match for Cheng Liang, but now it was a fight over women, and the most important factor here was their skills, not their battle prowess. He said, "What is it? Are you now furious after being humiliated because I hit the nail on the head? You're seeking death." Cheng Liang raised his hand, wanting to deliver a strike on Xueqi. Ling Han stretched out a leg, and with a light hook, pung, Cheng Liang's whole person stumbled onto the ground, landing solidly. When Xueqi saw this, he couldn't help but laugh loudly, but as he laughed, the smile on his face gradually disappeared. Which of those that were capable of enrolling into the Saintly Origin Academy was mediocre? Both he and Cheng Liang were emperor tiers, and could be considered above average even among emperor tiers. However, Cheng Liang tripped with just a hook of the leg from Ling Han. Just what kind of overwhelming strength was that? If he had previously leaked just a bit of covetous intentions towards the two women, would he also have been struck a blow? Cheng Liang was completely dizzy from his stumble, and only climbed to his feet after a long while. He looked towards Ling Han, initially with a dazed expression on his face, which then became anger. You dare to make a move on me? He was a disciple of Saintly Origin Academy. Your only support is your higher cultivation level. His expression was filled with contempt. The moment Ling Han moved, he could sense that the former should be a heaven soul, and he was only a Yin soul. Though he was an emperor tier, he could only be invincible against earth souls at most. Against a heaven soul, he could barely last a few moves, but would definitely be outmatched. How shameless! His cultivation level was higher than his, yet still launched a sneak attack? What was the meaning of that? The students in the area all nodded. With their insight, they could naturally distinguish Ling Han's cultivation level. He was indeed a heaven soul. Ling Han scoffed and said, "You dare to have unsightly designs on my wife, and are rebuking me for having a higher cultivation level?" Pooh! A considerable number of people immediately spluttered out in laughter. It was indeed Cheng Liang who had taken the initiative to approach and ask for a beating. To make a slightly unsuitable analogy, if someone were to harass your wife, how could it be that you would check to see if the other was your equal in strength before deciding to make a move? How could that be? Cheng Liang was struck speechless for the moment. Pointing at Ling Han, he declared, "All right. If you have the guts, don't run." He turned and ran into the academy gates. As a member of the academy, he would naturally not be obstructed. Very quickly, he disappeared from sight. There were no guards at the gates, but there was naturally a celestial king tier formation channeling, which was more useful than any kind of guards. "I say, brother, you had best run," someone called out towards Ling Han. "What for?" Ling Han asked smilingly. "Though Cheng Liang is weaker than you, not only is his older brother also an emperor tier, he is also a heaven soul," that person said. "You did not manage to enroll into the academy, and that means that you are at most only a heaven soul emperor tier, and belong to the category with strength that is weaker. There is no way you would be a match for Xueqi." Xueqi was Cheng Liang's older brother. To have two emperor tiers emerge from the same clan was very extraordinary. Being capable of enrolling into Saintly Origin Academy had now become the standard for assessing whether one was a prodigy or not. "Brother, don't cower. Isn't it just Xueqi? There's only one thing to do, and that's fight." Yet some deliberately egged him on, eager to watch the excitement. There were many of such people at that, and they cheered from the sidelines, cheering Ling Han on, and yelling in encouragement. Ling Han naturally would not be leaving. He merely smiled in response. Enrolling into the Saintly Origin Academy was actually very simple. One only had to prove that he possessed a strong natural talent in cultivation, or was an expert in a particular field. Thus, Ling Han and his group only had to get into a fight here, beating all their opponents into submission, and they naturally would be able to become a member of the academy. Fighting was a method that he preferred. Only a while later, Cheng Liang appeared again, with a man of short stature beside him. However, this man had an astonishing aura, as if there was a giant dragon coiled up within his body. So this short man was Xueqi. The two brothers really had very different appearances. Xueqi and his brother walked out of the gates, and both stopped in front of Ling Han. "To dare make a move on my younger brother, you are really quite bold," Xueqi stated coldly, his gaze not even falling on the Empress and Hu Niu. Instead, his stare was fixed on Ling Han and the Rain Emperor. It seemed like that not only did these two brothers have largely differing appearances, their personalities were also extremely different. Ling Han cracked a smile and said, "Oh, just second in the world. Humph, what I hate the most is when others speak cheekily in front of me." Xueqi's face was still icy cold. "Don't you know how to laugh?" Hunyao asked curiously. Xueqi immediately looked angered. "I have already said that I despise it when others speak cheekily in front of me." "You really won't laugh?" Hunyao was really curious, and couldn't help but ask again. Cheeky mouth. Xueqi couldn't hold himself back anymore. He stretched out his right hand, which turned into a golden millstone that descended down on Hunyao. Hunyao was intrigued now. Puffing up her cheeks, she blew out a breath, and the golden millstone was immediately sent flying backwards through the skies. In an instant, it disappeared without a trace. She was curious, and came closer to ask again. "Have you never laughed?" Xueqi did not panic. He stretched out his arms, and boom, gold spread out, turning everything in the surrounding area into metal. "Why can't you laugh?" Hunyao's eyes widened. She was completely unscathed. Chapter 2206. Won't Laugh. Xueqi suddenly felt a chill rise up from the depths of his heart, spreading to all his limbs and veins. Hunyao had dispersed his attack just by blowing a single breath. Though he was slightly surprised, he had not taken it too seriously, because that had been just a casual strike from him, but the last attack had been backed with his full power. She had not used any kind of celestial technique, and had just simply dashed in front of him. Her expression filled with curiosity. How could this not be terrifying? To say nothing of him, the people at the gates were all dumbstruck. This woman, could it be that she was a wolf in sheep's clothing? Yet Hunyao did not take it to heart at all. Her face was filled with curiosity. "You really won't laugh? Then, wouldn't that be too boring?" "Laugh your head." Xueqi roared furiously, suddenly raising his palm, and striking out at Hunyao. "Pa!" Hunyao stretched out a hand, and caught Xueqi's wrist. Displeased, she said, "Niao is asking a question, what kind of attitude is that? Are you displeased with Niao? If you're displeased, just say it, or how would Niao know? Don't think that you are so awesome just because you have a poker face. Niao can do it too." As expected, she put on a straight blank expression, facing off against Xueqi. The little girl had never admitted defeat to anyone, and was very intrigued by novelties. This was a little like Xiao Gu. Xueqi really wanted to cry, but had no tears. His reaction was very normal. All right? However, this indescribably beautiful woman in front of him was clearly an unreasonable character. Furthermore, how could he bring himself to beg for mercy in full public like this? "Let me warn you, this is the Saintly Origin Academy," he exclaimed loudly, which could be considered a covert way of giving in. "Niao knows where this is, of course. Why do you still have to tell Niao?" Hunyao slanted her head to one side, and thought for a moment. Then she couldn't help but become angry. "What you mean is Niao is very stupid, that Niao doesn't even know where this is?" Xueqi couldn't help but be completely dumbfounded. Those words could be comprehended in that manner. "What kind of brain do you have?" Pang! Ayo! He had not even finished the thought when his face had sustained a punch, so painful that even his tears were streaming. Pang! The shadowy fist flew towards him again. When the punch landed, he was directly dazed and completely out of his wits. Hunyao gripped the front of Xueqi's robes like she was dragging a dead dog. Then she swept a glance over the surrounding people and asked viciously, "You all think that Niao is foolish?" Woo! Everyone couldn't help but shake their head. This little girl was presently a bringer of calamity, so it was best not to anger her. "That's right, Niao is very smart." Hunyao was immediately all smiles. She got angry very easily, but was also easily pleased. "Pa!" She casually tossed Xueqi out. Not even knowing how to laugh, so boring. "Brother!" Liang hurriedly ran over, helping to support his elder brother. Thankfully, Hunyao had only punched him twice, and while Xueqi had been temporarily knocked out, his core had not been hurt. Thus, after Liang shook him a few times, Xueqi slowly regained consciousness. I can laugh. Xueqi revealed a silly smile, his head slightly turning. Right. He had been beaten silly, and he hadn't gotten all his wits back yet. So ugly, no wonder you never smile. Hunyao shuddered, her expression filled with disgust. Brother, wake up. Cheng Liang hurriedly tried to shake Xueqi's shoulders as much as possible. A few shakes later, Xueqi's eyes finally cleared up. He was first enraged, then overcome with fear, and finally his face flushed bright red. To be embarrassed and show such a foolish side of himself at the academy gates was probably going to be an eternal stain on his reputation. This grudge was huge. Without a second word, he directly ran towards the academy gates. Brother! Cheng Liang hurriedly set off in pursuit, and right when he was about to enter, he turned his head and said to Ling Han and his group, "If you have the guts, just wait right there." Seeing Hunyao raise her little fist, he hurriedly broke into a run. Ling Han simply took out a table and chairs, and then brewed some tea. The four of them sat down and began to sip tea. However, Hunyao did not have that kind of elegant taste at all. Very soon, she took out fish, meat, and so on, and began wolfing down her food without care. I say, brother, so you have hidden talents. However, Xueqi has long since sided with Huang Yishan. He is a heaven soul monarch tier, so do you think you can still stand against him? Another came out to inform him. That's right. You had best leave quickly. The Saintly Origin Academy is not a place for you to be impudent. All the prodigies of the entire celestial realm are here. So how could it be that you guys are going to defeat the whole world then? Though speaking such words were meant as a blow to Ling Han and his group, it was also a word of advice. However, some people were very mean, encouraging Ling Han and his group to continue to stay and fight. Ling Han naturally would not mind the opinions of others. He merely smiled slightly, and sipped tea with the Rain Emperor and the Empress. As for Hunyao, she would just continue to eat. Not long after, someone came out of the academy again. This time it was not just two people, but over a dozen of them, and all of them were striding majestically, exuding a domineering air that vied for supremacy. Monarch tier, monarch tier, monarch tier. They were all monarch tiers, except for Cheng Liang and Xueqi, of course. Did these brothers have such strong connections that they could mobilize over a dozen monarch tiers? Of course not. They returned to ask for Huang Yishan's help, and when they asked their boss for help, it just so happened that Huang Yishan had invited over a dozen monarch tiers to discuss cultivation with him. When they heard of this matter, they all came out. The majority of them had merely come to watch the excitement. Ling Han's eyes swept over them, and a hint of smile involuntarily showed on his face. Among these over 12 people, there were actually two that were his newly recruited lackeys, Gu Yushu and Dan Hao. They had both signed slavery contracts, promising to follow him for 10,000 years. These two people naturally spotted Ling Han as well, and their cheeks involuntarily twitched. They were both prodigies of the present generation, noble and proud monarch tiers, so they naturally did not want others to know that they had become someone else's followers, even if it was just for 10,000 years. Huang Yishan strode out. There was no need for Xueqi and his brother to make introductions at all. Ling Han and his group were too arrogant, just simply setting up a table and sipping tea in front of the academy gates. Even a blind man would be dazzled by this kind of showy brilliance. I know what you want to say. Before Huang Yishan had the chance to speak, Ling Han sipped some tea, then put down his teacup, and said, "Isn't it just going to be something like telling me to leave behind an arm or a leg, and then kneel down and apologize?" Such stereotypical behavior. Could you try something new? If it goes on like this, the audience will get bored of this flavor. When they heard these words, the people in the surroundings all laughed, feeling that Ling Han was really outrageously bold, actually daring to be so insolent even in front of Huang Yishan. Huang Yishan showed an expression that was both embarrassed and furious. He had truly planned to force Ling Han to kneel down in apology, and the latter would basically refuse, after which Huang Yishan could move, and then beat the opponent into kneeling on the ground, perfectly resolving this matter. But Ling Han didn't go by the rules, and said all this before he had the chance to. Then, even if he did beat Ling Han up, it would not be anything honorable, either. What a sharp tongue! Huang Yishan said coldly. Brother Huang, Gu Yushu spoke up. Harmony is to be prized in all situations, so why don't we just stop here? 1. Harmony is to be prized? Huang Yishan almost spluttered. Who does not know that you, Gu Yushu, have been the proudest and most arrogant? If anyone has not greeted you respectfully enough, you would be angered beyond reason, determined to beat the offender up. And now you are actually telling me that harmony is to be prized. Have you lost your senses? He chuckled coldly. If it was not for the fact that he was on amicable terms with Gu Yushu, he'd really want to slap the latter. Fuck, my lackey has been beaten up, and you are telling me that harmony is to be prized. Then what would that make me? Chapter 2207. Protected by Monarch Tears. Huang Yishan ignored Gu Yushu. He turned and looked at Ling Han again and said, "Since you can talk so well, I will give you a chance then. Break a leg, an arm, then kneel down and beg for mercy, and I will spare you." He had added everything Ling Han had said together, which could be considered slightly original. Ling Han shook his head. Even a threat was so boring. How uninteresting. Hu Niu put down her plate and kindly reminded him, "You can also *s rape." Pooh! Instantly, a number of people spluttered. Hearing the phrase *s rape from the mouth of a woman that was exquisite as a fairy was really a blow to their outlook. Even Ling Han could only place a hand on his forehead. He had just forbidden the little girl from *s raping anyone, and it was now permanently on her mind. Meanwhile, Huang Yishan was enraged. "Are you guys ridiculing me with your banter? Do you think that I, Huang Yishan, am made of clay? You're seeking death," he declared menacingly. "Since you people are so determined to provoke me, then just prepare to suffer the consequences." "Brother Huang." Gu Yushu leaped out. "Please calm your anger. Anything can be discussed peacefully." He ran out to persuade Huang Yishan precisely because he thought of him as a friend. He had suffered a loss at Ling Han's hands before, and knew that this guy was practically a demon. Moreover, Ling Han was his master, and had hold of his slavery contract. Now, with someone attempting to make a move on his master, there was naturally no way he could sit by idly and watch. Huang Yishan was not aware of these twists and turns, and couldn't help but look furious as he exclaimed, "Gu Yushu, you have stopped me repeatedly. What is the meaning of this? I'm trying to save you here. You have absolutely no idea how terrifying this bringer of calamity can be." He did not dare to say these words. Firstly, Ling Han had not allowed him to, and secondly, he could not bring himself to expose his embarrassment in public. Thus he could only urge, "Brother Huang, listen to me. Just let it go." Let it go? How am I supposed to let it go? What would that make me then? Huang Yishan smirked coldly, and said, "Could it be that if I do not listen to you, you would become my enemy?" These words were already filled with antagonism. Everyone thought that with how Huang Yishan had spoken such words, Gu Yushu would not continue to insist further. However, they had not foreseen that Gu Yushu's reaction would be so unexpected. His expression was solemn as he answered, "If Brother Huang insists, I do not mind a battle either. Brother, you would definitely be thanking me in the future." Whether Huang Yishan would be thanking Gu Yushu in the future or not was a matter for the future, but now his fury was pushed to the pinnacle. Why? Why did Gu Yushu actually become hostile with him for the sake of a stranger? Had this guy gone nuts? "Gu Yushu, you have really surprised and disappointed me." Huang Yishan looked coldly at Gu Yushu. "I have always wanted to exchange blows with you, and see which of us is stronger." Gu Yushu was naturally also a proud character. Hearing Huang Yishan's words, he couldn't help but put on an air of pride, and said, "Then, let's settle it with a battle." Huang Yishan did not waste any more words. With a sudden tap of his foot, he shot into the skies, and Gu Yushu followed closely. Then, a dazzling brilliance exploded in the skies. The two great monarch tears were already embroiled in an intense battle. Ling Han and his group raised their heads and watched. With their vision they naturally could see the battle clearly. As they sipped tea, they observed the great battle of monarch tears, and it was indeed an enjoyment. However, some could not bear to watch on. "Though there is no animosity between me and you guys are just too arrogant." Another monarch tear stepped out. "I don't care what insanity has captured Gu Yushu that he would step out on your behalf, but this is the Saintly Origin Academy, and your impudence is not allowed. Ling Han cracked a smile and asked, "What is it? Do you want a battle as well?" "Battle? Are you even qualified?" That monarch Tier smirked coldly. "I am only going to teach you a lesson so that you know what is proper and what is appropriate behavior." Ling Han gave an "oh" and answered, "Not qualified, indeed." Everyone thought that he was expressing his agreement with the words of that monarch Tier, but in the next instant, they knew that they were wrong. How could someone who had so brazenly set out a table to sip tea right in front of the academy gates be so humble? "You are too weak, unqualified to exchange blows with me." Ling Han nodded. That monarch Tier did not become angry, as if he already knew how Ling Han had a sharp tongue. He smirked coldly. "No matter how well you talk, it cannot change your strength. I only have to move, and you will be sprawled out on the ground." "Come that." Ling Han looked towards Dan Hao. "Right, what was your name again?" Dan Hao couldn't help but feel gloomy. For better or worse, he was still a monarch Tier, yet he wasn't even qualified to have Ling Han remember his name. Dan Hao. He could not refuse to answer, so could only reply with a dark expression. "Ha!" Everyone was surprised. "Why are you so obedient? It should be known that you are a monarch Tier, so what happened to your pride?" "Oh, Dan Hao." Ling Han nodded. "I'll leave this one to you." "All right." Dan Hao stepped out and walked towards that monarch Tier. "Brother Pang, apologies." "Fuck." Everyone could not believe it. He asked you for your name, and you immediately replied. He commanded you to fight, and you just obediently ran out. Did you go nuts? That monarch Tier's surname was Pang, with the first name being Mu. He looked at Dan Hao strangely and asked, "Brother Dan, could it be that this boy has some incredible background? Otherwise, how could he possibly command a monarch Tier?" Dan Hao shook his head. "Brother Pang, don't ask so many questions. Just know that harmony is to be prized." Again, harmony is to be prized. Had these monarch Tier prodigies all gone nuts today? They were all actually advocating that harmony was to be prized. Pang Mu felt that this was very abnormal. To have Gu Yushu and Dan Hao step out for them one after another. If Ling Han did not have an outrageously powerful background, who would believe that? But monarch Tiers like them had also come from 6th Heaven Celestial King Tier sects, at least, and also had powerful backgrounds. What more now when they had enrolled into Saintly Origin Academy? Did they still need to give anyone face? What kind of secret were these 4 people hiding? "Let's have a battle then." He was curious and also very angry. With a leap, he shot into the air, wanting to battle Dan Hao. Dan Hao naturally would not cower. He similarly rose into the air, and boom, the second battle soon broke out. Everyone looked at one another. Next, would there be other monarch Tiers that would step out and want to teach Ling Han a lesson? And if such monarch Tiers appeared, would there also be other monarch Tiers stepping out to stop them? All of a sudden, the atmosphere was strangely quiet. Everyone was watching the skies. For great monarch Tiers, exchanging blows was not something that could be seen all the time. Alerted by the great battle of monarch Tiers, more people appeared at the gates of the academy and found out about how things had progressed to this point. There were also monarch Tiers among them. "Oh, interesting." As expected, new monarch Tiers stepped out. "I don't believe it." He did not waste any words. The moment he appeared, he rushed towards Ling Han and his group. He shot out a punch, wanting to overturn their tea table. Xiao, a figure shot out, and darted towards that monarch Tier. Ji Kuang. That monarch Tier roared furiously. What was going on here? Were they all traitors? Would there always be someone that would step out for Ling Han and his group? Ji Kuang was one of the 10 great monarch Tiers that Ling Han had recruited. He was internally very displeased as well, but it could not be helped. Who asked him to receive a signal from Ling Han? "Come fight." He couldn't be bothered to waste words, either, and shot into the skies. At this, everyone could not keep their composure any longer. Altogether, there were a total of 3 monarch Tiers that had stepped out for Ling Han and his group. Just who exactly were these 4 people? Being made of clay means that you have no temper. Chapter 2208. Fifth pinnacle. The identities of Ling Han and his group drew the curiosity of the masses, and also led to more monarch tiers stepping out, wanting to force out the trump cards of Ling Han and his group. However, there was also an endless stream of monarch tiers that stepped out for Ling Han. It couldn't be helped. He just happened to recruit 10 monarch tiers some days ago. When these 10 people had all stepped out, Ling Han couldn't help but smile. He had gained new helpers. Yi Yan Xianlu, Cheng Zixin, and the others were all monarch tiers that were allied with him. Without any need for Ling Han to speak up, these people took the initiative to move, helping to feed Ling Han's momentum. At first, the spectators at the gates were only curious, but as they continued watching, they became stunned. So many monarch tiers had moved out, all just for the sake of Ling Han and his group. If this power could be mobilized by Ling Han and his group, just how terrifying would that be? He could instantly become the fifth pinnacle of the academy, establishing a force that was not inferior to the forces established by Ji Wuming, Shi Chanzi, and the others. What was even more overwhelming was that this didn't show the true strength of Ling Han and his group yet. Who knew exactly how many monarch tiers there were under his command? However, when more and more monarch tiers were intrigued with this, the cards that belonged to Ling Han were finally all played. When the 37th monarch tier appeared, no new monarch tier came out to keep off fights for Ling Han and his group. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. It looked like there were just 36 monarch tiers under Ling Han and his group's command. But upon further thought, they were internally aghast. 36 monarch tiers, what kind of concept was this? As long as these people didn't die, they would all be capable of becoming celestial kings in the future, and their lowest achievement would be fourth heaven, at least, or even fifth heaven. What kind of terrifying power was this? In the skies, the 36 battles were all progressing heatedly, and as many as 72 monarch tiers were battling fiercely. This kind of scene was definitely a rarity. Han Lin, right? The 37th monarch tier looked at Ling Han. So long had passed, and with the means of a monarch tier, he had naturally clearly investigated the origins of Ling Han and his group. Of course, that was only limited to the information that Ling Han allowed them to find out. Care for a spar? He did not dare go too far. Though not one of Ling Han or his group had moved, they were able to mobilize 36 monarch tiers. Who dared to underestimate them? The Empress leaped out, but did not answer. She merely crooked her finger at that person, showing clearly her pride. That monarch tier couldn't help but feel angered. You are indeed beautiful, but this is the world that belongs to cultivators. Beauty is only the prize of elites. He humphed, and immediately charged towards the Empress. The Empress was incredibly aggressive. That was how her personality was, and her style of attack was the same. Boom! A great battle broke out. The two of them did not take their battle into the skies, but rather stayed on the ground. Because the Empress had not soared into the skies, the other naturally would not be going skywards all alone and put on a one-man show. Everyone soon looked shocked. Unlike the battles in the skies, though the 72 monarch tiers all had varying differences in their strength, deciding the victory in battle was definitely not a matter that would happen quickly. The moment the Empress moved, she was overbearing. In just over a dozen moves, she was completely on the active side. After 100 moves, she had already built up an upper hand, and victory was within her grasp. This was really horrifying. They were both monarch tiers, but why was there such a huge gap between the two of them? It should be known that monarch tier meant that one could be strongest in a battle of equals. Since they were already the strongest, their abilities should be quite close to one another's. How could such an obvious disparity appear? Another 100 moves later, the Empress pushed out a palm, and pang, that monarch tier was sent flying, and sprawled out on the ground, unable to catch his breath for a long while. In this instant, the area was completely dead silent. Though they had predicted that the Empress would win, when they really witnessed this scene, everyone was still numb with shock. A monarch tier had lost just like that. Was there anyone left that could defeat Ling Han and his group? Could it be that there were not many that could fight in the giant saintly origin academy, and these 4 people were allowed to continue blocking the gates in their arrogance? Let's get an Immortal Palace tier, someone suggested. Immortal Palace tier. Ling Han and his group were all only heaven souls. If they got an Immortal Palace tier to help, wouldn't that be just the act of a bully? But Heaven's Soul monarch tiers had all lost so frankly. Without an immortal palace tier, was there anyone left that could suppress these 4 people? It's too bad that Ji Wuming, Shi, Hong Huang, and Jia Lan have all broken through to the immortal palace tier. Otherwise, they would be the strongest Heaven's Souls. Someone mused with regret. That's right. This won everyone's agreement. Ji Wuming and the others were really too strong, completely suppressing every other monarch tier to the point that they paled in comparison. If there was a hierarchy of monarch tiers, the 4 of them would definitely be the pinnacle, and there was no one that could be their equal. I heard a few troublesome characters have come. A young man appeared, dressed in snow-white robes, appearing incredibly confident. Senior Brother Ji. When they saw this person, everyone in the vicinity paid their respects. Ji Yutong, a disciple of the Academy, and a first secret monarch tier. Though the true starting line of the race among monarch tiers was the Celestial King tier, cultivation level was also a realistic comparison. He was presently a first secret elite, and that was stronger than the Heaven Soul, and it was not just by a bit, either there was a completely overwhelming advantage. Hence, there was a need to maintain respect. Ji Yutong walked towards Ling Han and his group. As he walked, he released his own aura. Boom, the mystical power of the immortal palace tier spread out, shaking the heavens. In the skies, all 36 battles had stopped, and the 72 monarch tiers all descended back to the ground, looking at Ji Yutong reverently. Even though they were just one step behind Ji Yutong, this one step had led to a massive gap appearing between the strength of both sides. It was a gap that could not be compensated with any amount of talent. Without entering the immortal palace tier, even the strongest Heaven Soul was still just a dividing soul tier. Hong long long, the ground trembled continuously, as if it could not bear Ji Yutong's domineering air. The Rain Emperor's eyes lit up. He stood up. Fourth brother, leave this opponent to meal. All right. Ling Han nodded. He knew that the Rain Emperor had just attained dividing 9 souls, and was just wanting to test out his strength. A mere dividing soul tier, and you actually dare to oppose me? Ji Yutong demanded in disdain. What did a first secret monarch tier signify? He could have invincible battle prowess even against an opponent of third secret. Ordinarily, when 10 Heaven Soul monarch tiers joined forces, they could match a first secret opponent, but that was only an ordinary first secret. Against a first secret monarch tier, they would only be defeated, and the Rain Emperor was only one person at that. There was no way that he could defeat even an ordinary first secret opponent, and he still wanted to fight him. He had to be joking. The Rain Emperor stared at Ji Yutong for a while, and said, "Use your full prowess, or I will kill you." Ji Yutong was practically exploding in fury. A mere dividing soul tier actually dared demand that he use his full prowess. He could not help but laugh in his extreme fury. Fine, then I will oblige. In any case, this person was not a disciple of the Academy, so it would be fine even if he killed him. The Rain Emperor moved. Xiao, he appeared in front of Ji Yutong with a flash. He shot out a punch, and boom, it was like a star was falling, unmatched in its dominance. Ji Yutong couldn't help but be astonished, and hurriedly moved to parry. Pang! He retreated backwards in a hurry, feeling all the bones in his body were trembling, which was extremely uncomfortable. Though the Rain Emperor had also taken a few steps back, the distance he had retreated was clearly shorter than Ji Yutong. It could not be any more obvious. Ji Yutong was inferior to the Rain Emperor. Everyone was dumbfounded. A mere Heaven Soul actually managed to get the upper hand in a clash with a first secret monarch tier. Who would have believed this? Hiss, this was a monster that was capable of being equal to Ji Wuming, Hong Huang, and other such supreme monarch tiers. Yet Ling Han shook his head slightly. Though the Rain Emperor had heaven-defying good fortune, and had refined the corpse of a 9th Heaven Celestial King, this clearly was not comparable to Ji Wuming, who was the direct reincarnation of a 9th Heaven Celestial King. If the Rain Emperor was only this strong, then in a battle of equals, the Rain Emperor was definitely not Ji Wuming's match. Chapter 2209. Enrolled into the Academy. However, even so, it was still a piece of cake for the Rain Emperor to suppress Ji Yutong. Perhaps when the Rain Emperor experienced another heaven-defying stroke of luck, he could further boost his battle prowess, and be truly ranked in the top tier. The Rain Emperor shot out countless punches. He had long since walked out his own path, but at that time, his cultivation level was too low, and he had still been far from reaching the height of regulations. But it was a different story now. He had blended regulations in, and the Rain Emperor's path had also truly become clear. In front of many eyes, the Rain Emperor completely had the upper hand, with each punch stronger than the last, suppressing Ji Yutong completely. Ji Yutong was initially embarrassed and furious. He, a great first secret monarch tier, was actually being suppressed by a dividing soul tier. But it was quickly followed by great shock, because there was not just one such freak in the Saintly Origin Academy. And this kind of person would have boundless future prospects. The heights they could reach was not something that he could even imagine. Which also meant that no matter how humiliated he was today, he would not have a chance for revenge in future. The purpose behind establishing the academy was to nurture talent, and even more effort of nurturing would be concentrated on a prodigy like the Rain Emperor. If anyone dared to touch a hair on the head of the Rain Emperor, just see if those ninth heaven celestial kings wouldn't explode. When he thought about this, Ji Yutong's fighting spirit naturally declined greatly. Continuing the battle would only result in a terrible defeat, and he would not be able to get revenge either, so what was the point in fighting? Humph, I am a first secret monarch tier, and I disdain from bullying a mere dividing soul tier. Throwing down a line that fitted the situation, he suddenly turned and left. Of course, no one would believe his nonsense, but his strength was obvious. Who would dare to expose his wounds right in front of him? The Rain Emperor did not pursue. He closed his eyes slightly, pondering on his own shortcomings in the previous battle. What was so terrifying about prodigies? It was that they would never be satisfied with their own achievements. Instead, they would continue to cautiously and conscientiously advance to a stronger level. Ling Han also felt strange. They had created such a great ruckus, but why was there still no movement from the academy? Could it be they really wanted them to sweep through the entire academy? Inside the academy, several powerful figures were gathered for discussion. These four youths are not bad, especially those two men. They have both attained dividing 9 souls, a ninth heaven celestial king said. He was the Eternity Celestial King, his cultivation level carrying on through eternity. A second ninth heaven celestial king nodded, and said, the invasion from the foreign realm is close at hand, and massive changes have also taken place in the heaven and earth. Otherwise, not even one prodigy that has attained dividing 9 souls may appear in a whole epoch. His title was Everlasting Youth, and he was a veteran among veteran celestial kings. A third ninth heaven celestial king said, even if they have cultivated to dividing 9 souls, it is not definite that they would become ninth heaven celestial kings, and so many dividing 9 souls prodigies have appeared this time. Would it be possible that an even stronger existence could emerge? His title was Treading Clouds, and he was also a veteran celestial king. Heavenly Venerable Tier? The Eternity Celestial King thought for a moment, but then shook his head. Becoming a heavenly venerate is not possible through mere effort and natural talent. The heaven and earth would suppress you, and without finding a suitable trigger, there would be no way to cast off the shackles of heaven and earth, and advance to the heavenly venerable tier. That's right. The heaven and earth would not allow an uncontrollable force to appear. Through the ages, just how many heavenly venerates had there been? The Everlasting Youth Celestial King agreed. But this time, the invasion of the foreign realm will directly affect the survival of the heaven and earth. Perhaps the heaven and earth will also change to a limited extent. See, isn't the appearance of the Dragon's Gate Mountain a compromise from the heaven and earth? Yet Treading Cloud Celestial King had a different opinion. A thought suddenly came to the Eternity Celestial King, and he exclaimed, if your deduction is correct, then wouldn't that mean that those 3 he pointed at the skies have all been born for the calamity? Otherwise, I definitely do not believe that anyone can surpass regulations, Treading Cloud Celestial King said. Just how long have the 3 of us stagnated in the 9th Heaven Celestial King tier? Yet it is still complete darkness ahead of us, and we cannot glimpse the slightest sliver of a chance to advance further. It is this heaven and earth that has restricted us, just like the restrictions on the height of regulations. Unless the heaven and earth loosens the restrictions, there will be no one that can step out of the pinnacle of the Celestial King tier. Which also means that the invasion of the foreign realm is actually a chance? Maybe. This group of youths, as well as Imperial Void, Zi Luo, Na Dong, and the other newly promoted ninth heaven celestial kings all have a chance of snatching this opportunity to transcend the heaven and earth. The three celestial kings looked at one another, and all of them sighed. Even among ninth heaven celestial kings, there were differences in strength. The three great celestial kings that they had mentioned, like Imperial Void, Zi Luo, and Na Dong, were well-known figures even among ninth heaven celestial kings. Some have only advanced into ninth heaven celestial king tier for only tens of billions of years, while there were some that had been at this level for as long as 5 or 6 epochs. However, true overlords among ninth heaven celestial kings all had a chance of breaking through to the heavenly venerable tier. Yet they were still quite some distance away, and were not qualified for that. When we defeat the troops of the foreign realm this time, I wish to journey into the foreign realm, the Eternity Celestial King suddenly said. Are you mad? The everlasting youth Celestial King paled. The heaven and earth of the foreign realm is completely different from the celestial realm. The regulations we cultivate would be completely useless there. After entering that place, we would only be able to battle by depending on the regulations that are locked within our bodies. Once they are fully exhausted, our strength would decline to an inconceivable level, which may only be at the severing mundane tier. This was applicable for foreign realm elites. That was why the celestial realm had been able to hold on for so long. Brother everlasting youth, in this heaven and earth, there was never any possibility for us to stand out. But when we reach the foreign realm, while we would still have to start from the very beginning again, there is a chance that we could leap from a small pond into the bigger ocean and have more space for development. The Eternity Celestial King proposed another point of view. That's right. The Treading Cloud Celestial King nodded. The overall level of cultivation of the foreign realm is higher than ours. Otherwise, it would be us that would be the invaders. Since that is the case, the chances of breaking through to the heavenly venerable tier would also be considerably increased there. We can attain the ninth heaven, and that means that our natural talent and aptitude is all top tier. As long as we were given a chance, why wouldn't we be able to break out of ninth heaven? Everlasting Youth Celestial King was silent for a while, and then said, all of that would have to depend on the final battle. If we lose, there is no need to mention anything else. Naturally. The other two celestial kings nodded as well. Only if the celestial realm was secured would they be able to think of other matters. Otherwise, when the nest overturned, would there be any egg remaining intact? All right, enroll these 4 young people into the academy. It is not proper to have them continue to block the gates, the Treading Cloud Celestial King said smilingly. He stretched out a hand, and tapped a few times on empty air. Instantly, a decree appeared above the academy. The 4 of you, don't cause any more trouble. Enter the academy immediately, and there naturally will be someone to make arrangements for you. The words were very frank and straightforward, with absolutely no beating around the bush. Ling Han smiled slightly. He rose up and stowed the table and chairs all into the Black Tower. They could cause trouble, but if they did not behave even when a celestial king had spoken, that would only be a suicidal course of action. They entered into the academy, and an ascending origin tier elite immediately approached. Smiling, he said, "Youths, follow me." Ascending origin tier was really not much in a celestial king tier force, and they could not put on any airs at all. Yet Ling Han and the rest did not dare treat him lightly. There was a need to give adequate respect to an elite. They entered into the academy, and the ascending origin tier elite introduced himself. My surname is Luo, and you may address me as Mr. Luo. Mr. Luo. Ling Han and his group went with his flow. Mr. Luo nodded, and then asked, what regulations do you mainly cultivate? Whatever regulations they cultivated, they would be placed on the mountain that corresponded to that regulation. Cultivating like this would mean half the work with twice the results. Ling Han scratched his head, and said, Mr. Luo, you should ask me what regulations I don't cultivate. I would be able to answer that better. Mr. Luo means that no member escapes unscathed from a family disaster, which, in this case, refers to the celestial realm. Chapter 22:10. Are you threatening me? How arrogant. For most people, their energy was limited, especially in the case of prodigies. To attain quick success, they should definitely focus on a single type of regulations and improve their cultivation level. If there were 2 people with similar aptitude, and one focused on cultivating regulations of water, while the other cultivated both regulations of water and fire, It would definitely be the one who focused solely on cultivating regulation of water that would improve faster, and in an actual battle, it would also be the former who would be stronger because they could use their superior cultivation level to suppress their opponent. Only after advancing into the Celestial King tier where advancement was really too slow would one turn to cultivate other regulations. Otherwise, they would only be idling their time away. What did Ling Han mean? He had cultivated the majority of regulations, and that was why he said it would be better to ask him which regulations he did not cultivate. You were just a mere dividing soul tier, and wouldn't such excessive greed affect your progress? Mr. Luo faltered for a moment, and then burst out laughing. He was actually not angered. He had obtained a personal message transmitted through divine sense from the Celestial Kings, commanding that he should properly entertain these 4 people. And being able to obtain a personal command from the 9th Heaven Celestial Kings regarding them, these 4 people were naturally out of the ordinary. Thus, though Mr. Luo faltered for a moment, he did not think that Ling Han was being too arrogant. Perhaps this was the exact reason that he had gained the recognition of the Celestial Kings. Fine then, what regulations don't you cultivate? Mr. Luo asked. Seems to be only regulation of poison, Ling Han answered after some thought. Mr. Luo was troubled now. He looked at those majestic great mountains at this moment, and did not know where he should arrange for Ling Han's accommodations. I can stay anywhere, Ling Han said with a smile. He had obtained 9 source powers of heaven and earth, and this was the best treasure for comprehending regulations. Even after he advanced into Celestial King tier, he could still continue comprehension. Hu Niu and the Empress did not have any specific requirements, either. They, too, possessed a source power of heaven and earth, and could completely break through to Celestial King tier with that. As for the Rain Emperor, he did not need it either, because he had refined the remains of a Celestial King, and this was more or less equivalent to a source power of heaven and earth. Thus, after a round of questions, all 4 of them were very carefree, which made Mr. Luo slightly depressed. He had never seen such students, and 4 of them had appeared at the same time. All right then, I'll just randomly arrange your accommodations. Mr. Luo couldn't be bothered to deal with the headache, and simply handed the power over to the 4 of them. The Herb Mountain then. The thought suddenly came to Ling Han. Mr. Luo would never have imagined that Ling Han would come up with such an idea. Even if he was an ascending origin tier elite, he was still clearly dazed for a moment, being completely baffled. Seeing no objections arise from the Rain Emperor and the others, Mr. Luo couldn't help but ask, "Are you sure?" "Sure." Ling Han and the others all nodded. In any case, for comprehension of regulations, they had source powers of heaven and earth and the remains of the Celestial King, and in the case of cultivation, the 10,000 times acceleration effects of the Black Tower was even more powerful, so there was absolutely no need for them to draw support from any external conditions. What Ling Han needed were the resources that only the Saintly Origin Academy could provide. All right then. Mr. Luo nodded. He had obtained instructions from the Celestial Kings that he was to give Ling Han and his group enough independence, so he did not make any further efforts of persuasion. The 4 of them found 4 neighboring abodes on the Herb Mountain, and then settled down. Of course, the Empress and Hu Niu would definitely be staying together with Ling Han, while the Rain Emperor would be entering into the Black Tower for cultivation. The brothers discussed cultivation for a while, sharing their knowledge, and both felt that they had derived some benefit from their conversation. Their arrival in the academy gave rise to a commotion. Very quickly, everyone found out that Ling Han and the Rain Emperor were supreme monarch tiers just like Ji Wuming and Hong Huang. They were clearly only heaven souls, yet could match a first secret monarch tier, or even suppress the latter. Everyone was discussing them spiritedly. Those like Ji Wuming, Hong Huang, and the others were really too strong, and even monarch tiers would willingly bow to them and follow their leadership, causing the forces of these 4 people to be stronger than ever before. Yet now, another 2 such supreme monarch tiers had come, and they were sworn brothers at that. If they advanced one step further, and also became immortal palace tiers, then wouldn't it become the very strongest force inside the academy? Would Ji Wuming and the others just watch as this happened? The answer was soon revealed. Merely a day later, a person had arrived in front of the abodes of Ling Han and his group. This was a first secret monarch tier, and his flame of life had burnt for at least over 1 billion years. When Ling Han first set eyes on him, he felt a stabbing pain, and only after channeling his origin power did this feeling finally vanish. This person was very strong. At least, He was stronger than Ji Yutong. I am Hu Yan. This first secret monarch tier smiled. His smile very gentle. I have previously stayed in the Imperial Void Sect for a while. The Imperial Void Sect. And what did previously mean? He could resign even after joining the Imperial Void Sect. I have come on behalf of Lord Hong Huang to invite the four of you to join our Huang Alliance. Hu Yan was very approachable, his smile gentle and mild. Oh. Ling Han declined to comment. At present, it was only him, the Empress, and Hu Niu here. The Rain Emperor was a madman of cultivation, and wanted to cultivate to the consummate level of Heaven's Soul as soon as possible, so he was still in seclusion in the Black Tower. Lord Hong Huang knows that Brother Han and Brother Rain have excellent aptitude, and your future accomplishments will definitely be astonishing as well. Thus, he has deliberately left out 2 positions of Vice Alliance Leader for Brother Han and Brother Rain, Hu Yan continued. Ling Han chuckled, and was just about to speak when yet another person appeared. This was a beautiful woman dressed completely in red, and looked fiery. I am Chia. This woman was also fiery in the way she spoke. Our fairy Jialan would like to invite the 4 of you over for a chat to discuss the details of a mutual aspiration. Hu Yan frowned and said, Chia, all matters depend on the order of arrival. I have already issued an invitation to Brother Han and his group, so you had better wait for next time. What a joke. In our world of cultivators, what order of arrival is there? Everything is based on strength. Chiya's expression was disdainful. Our fairy Jialan will definitely inspire awe throughout the celestial realm in the future, and become the sole empress. Assisting our fairy to ascend the throne is the truly wisest course of action. Absolute nonsense. Hu Yan rebuked, and he truly deserved the name Hu Yan won. When he spoke the word nonsense, he did not show the slightest discomfort. Lord Hong Huang is the only great emperor, conquering through all the ages, and suppressing for all eternity. Humph, you can only speak tough now. Not long after, our fairy will teach Hong Huang a lesson. Chiya's expression was still filled with disdain. Hold on. Ling Han pressed his hands down. There is no need for you guys to compete. I have no interest in joining either side, so the 2 of you had best just return. When these words fell, both Hu Yan and Chiya shut their mouths. Then they turned to look at him, their eyes slightly cold. Young Master Han, this is an invitation from Lord Hong Huang, Hu Yan said menacingly, completely shifting his previously gentle appearance, just like a fierce beast that had torn off its pretense, showing its true ferocious colors. Chiya was even more direct. She drew out a long spear and exclaimed, Since our fairy has said that she wishes to invite the 4 of you over, I will definitely accomplish this task. Ling Han flicked the sleeve of his robes and said, I have always despised threats, so the 2 of you had best leave as soon as possible before I truly get angry. Young Master Han is really unwilling to give us some face? Hu Yan asked finally, his fighting spirit blazing, turning into multiple blades and seals. There was also a clanging sound that resounded through the heavens, and was incredibly domineering. Are you threatening me? Ling Han countered. Chapter 22:11. True Might of First Secret. I only wish to ask young Master Han to reconsider, Hu Yan said, his tone having lost all its previous good nature, exuding an air of imperiousness. Hee hee. Ling Han took the initiative to move, and grabbed out at Hu Yan. Boom, the giant hand spread out like a layer of dense clouds. Hu Yan smirked coldly. Young Master Han, do you think I'm Ji Yutong? He sent out a punch in response to Ling Han's giant hand. Boom, a loud sound spread out, and Ling Han's and Hu Yan's body trembled. Endless brilliance surged out, turning into layers of seals. In this clash, the 2 of them had actually come out even. Ling Han appeared slightly surprised. This Hu Yan had not been making empty boasts. He was indeed stronger than Ji Yutong, and could be ranked in the top tier even among monarch tiers. However, he was still a far way away from Ling Han, Ji Wuming, and their likes. Otherwise, with an advantage of a major tier on his side, he should be completely capable of overwhelming Ling Han. Hu Yan's expression was filled with pride as he declared, I have cultivated severing mundane tier 7 times, and have struck myself a total of 35 times. Though I still have not attained dividing 9 souls, my battle prowess would not be much inferior to dividing 9 souls. He was a supreme prodigy himself, but Hong Huang was far more freakish than him. Furthermore, his background was too extraordinary, and that was why he had been willing to fall under the latter's rule. Otherwise, he himself should be a great emperor, so how could he be subordinate to another? Ling Han merely chuckled in response. No matter how many strikes he delivered, he was only severing mundane tier at most, and could not be compared with dividing 9 souls. Otherwise, Hu Yan would not have tied with him in battle. Was your advantage in cultivation level meaningless? After all, only if one had cultivated every cultivation level to perfection could he be supreme in his brilliance. I am quite intrigued, Ling Han said smilingly. Ji Yutong was too weak, and Ling Han had been able to suppress him single-handedly. What would be interesting about that? Intrigued? Hu Yan humphed coldly. This gentle, mild young man showed a fanaticism, and this was his true colors. Then let me first ensure that you know the true measure of your own abilities to avoid you acting inappropriately in front of Lord Hong Huang. This time, he took the initiative to move. He sent out a punch with his eyes wide, a frightening divine light shining brilliantly. Mystical power of Immortal Palace tier? Ling Han was slightly curious. In the face of this divine light, it was hard for him to even open his eyes. He was completely unable to see the situation ahead of him. It was not only his vision that was affected, but also divine sense as well, as if he had indeed become blind. The Immortal Palace tier cultivated the mystery realm within their bodies, heart, liver, spleen, lung, and kidney. With cultivation of every mystery realm, they would possess a strong ability. For example, the dazzling divine light shining from Hu Yan's eyes was one of the abilities. This was suppression of the cultivation level. Even if Ling Han was equivalent to First Secret, he had not truly crossed over into the Immortal Palace tier, after all, so he could not be immune. It was a dominance of cultivation level, and could not be helped. As the divine light shone brilliantly, Hu Yan charged out, a fist aimed directly for Ling Han's face. As the saying went, when you get into a fight, never aim for the face. Yet he purposely made a move for Ling Han's face, so his intentions to humiliate him could not be more obvious. Presently, Ling Han could only depend on his instincts warning him about danger. Otherwise, if he were to react when he felt the incoming force, it would already be too late. He smirked coldly, and his right hand stretched out to grab Hu Yan's wrist. Involuntarily, Hu Yan's expression shifted slightly. In a situation when the 5 senses and divine sense were affected, he could still react so precisely. This was a little shocking. This was the battle instinct of a supreme monarch tier. As he thought this, his attacks did not slow down in the slightest. Pung, 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 his feet moved, and he began circling around Ling Han, unleashing punches in a quick barrage. Break! Ling Han shouted. He was naturally unwilling to be beaten down like this. Boom! Great clash of source powers blasted out, and fiercely exploded with him at the center. Hu Yan was instantly pale with fear. This destructive power caused a chill to rise all over his body, and he felt that he would be instantly turned to dust if there was the slightest contact. Hurriedly, he retreated, not daring to face this head-on. Ling Han did not pursue. Instead, he channeled origin power, and multiple seals flickered in his eyes, causing his sight to slowly go back to normal. He stated calmly, "Your first mystery realm has been formed through temperance of fire." "That's right," Hu Yan answered proudly. "You have attained dividing 9 souls, which is comparable to the first secret, but against a true first secret, you still have a long way to go. The strength that I have previously shown is only one of the abilities of my mystery realm, and a negligible part of it at that. And now, I will show you the true power of the mystery realm of the Immortal Palace tier." With a soft exclamation, boom, fiery flames were instantly ignited all over his body, and the clothing on his upper body was instantly burnt into dust. His body had become semi-translucent, and his heart was easily visible. "The first mystery realm I cultivated was the heart," he declared proudly. "It was tempered in the flames that would never be extinguished in an epoch of burning mountain, and I can also draw on a sliver of might of the inextinguishable burning mountain." Do you know what that means? The inextinguishable burning flame is at the Celestial King tier. Hence, with my grasp of a sliver of the inextinguishable burning flame, it would be equivalent to having possessed a sliver of Celestial King tier might. Ha ha ha, This is the true power of immortal palace tier. Boom! His heart turned into a raging furnace. No, it would be better to call it a volcanic crater, spurting crimson red lava, endlessly surging out, and turning the surroundings into an ocean of flames. Wang wang wang. However, when the lava flow reached the herbs and sides of the abode, multiple streaks of light flashed, turning into brilliantly shining seals, stopping the lava's invasion, and protecting the medicinal ingredients and structure. This was a formation laid down by a celestial king, and that was why Hu Yan dared to move recklessly. Otherwise, there were masses of valuable herbs on this herb mountain, and some of them were even astonishingly old celestial medicines. How could Hu Yan afford the reimbursement? This lava was extremely terrifying, with shards of regulations moving within it, and turning into multiple ancient seals. Burning Mountain was a famous ancient mountain of the celestial realm. The time of its existence could no longer be traced, and it was one of the most ancient locations of the celestial realm. Furthermore, Burning Mountain constantly experienced volcanic eruptions, and the underground flames burned endlessly. That was also a holy land for concocting alchemical pills. A great many alchemists would go there, and draw on the help of the underground flames for concocting alchemical pills. It could greatly increase the success rate and effects of the completed alchemical pill. Now that Hu Yan had plucked the flames of the inextinguishable flames of Burning Mountain to refine into his first mystery realm, he had also gained a sliver of might of this ancient flame. There is still time to correct your attitude now. Hu Yan's whole person was flowing with lava. Like a god of fire, he strode towards Ling Han, an expression of arrogance on his face. They were both monarch tiers, but with the different power of heaven and earth that they plucked upon advancing to the immortal palace tier, their battle prowess would also be greatly different. Ji Yutang. He had originated from the Imperial Void sect, so how could he be compared with that kind of trash? Quite interesting, Ling Han murmured. Boom, a flame also surged from his body, standing off against the lava. 9 Heavens Flame. A source power of heaven and earth. Unfortunately, due to the limits of Ling Han's cultivation level, the 9 Heavens Flame could only form a shield of fire around him, and could not unfold a territory to stand off against this omnipresent lava. Yet Ling Han was completely unconcerned. Instead, he was quite keen. That was because the 9 Heavens Flame was presently swallowing the lava. Though the rate was very slow, it was indeed happening. It could not be helped. In terms of essence, the 9 Heavens Flame was definitely stronger. This was a source power of heaven and earth. The 9 Heavens Flame was analyzing the lava, or to be more precise, it was analyzing the regulation of fire in the lava, gradually absorbing it and making that power its own. This was extremely necessary. If Ling Han could advance into Celestial King tier now, the 9 Heavens Flame would naturally rise with him, and cross over into Celestial King tier as well, but that was only limited to the first heaven. This was the restriction of heaven and earth. However, the 9 Heavens Flame still had room for improvement, and that was to fuse with other regulations of fire. And what the 9 Heavens Flame was presently doing was precisely this. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.